passe maintenant le micro.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It's day 31 of the Israel-Hamas war. The IDF continues to press forward in northern Gaza, saying its forces seized a major Hamas stronghold there, caused significant damage to its terror tunnels, and killed dozens of terrorists, including senior commanders, over the past 24 hours. This from both ground operations and airstrikes. The cost was another soldier's life, bringing to 30 the number of combat deaths in Gaza, part of the some 1,400 who have lost their lives since October 7th, along with a confirmed 241 hostages. On the northern front, over 30 rockets fired into Israel from South Lebanon today, along with drones, intercepted by air defenses. The IDF responded with airstrikes and artillery fire at Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. And terror also striking today in Jerusalem, with a border police officer, U.S. immigrant Elisheva Rose Lubin, stabbed to death by a Palestinian resident of East Jerusalem who was shot dead on the scene. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met today with a group of foreign ambassadors and had this to say about the wider regional, even global implications of Israel's war against Hamas.
If they go strong, if they're not defeated, they will derail this process. They will imperil the entire Middle East. If the Middle East falls to the axis of terror, Europe will be next, and no one will be safe. This is not a local battle. This is a global battle. The paramount need is to defeat this axis. That battle is now being waged by us against Hamas in Gaza. There is no substitute for victory. We will defeat Hamas. We will dismantle Hamas. We will offer the people of Gaza and the entire peoples of the Middle East a real future, a future of promise and hope. But this requires victory. We have the will and we have the power to do so. We will win. And we believe that all civilized powers should back us in this effort, because this battle is your battle and our victory is your victory.
And joining me in studio is our senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Ostron, our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alman. And Owen, a message there from Prime Minister Netanyahu, definitely geared, tailored to an international audience, a global audience. It's not our battle, it's your battle as well. As long as stressing a sort of optimistic picture, one of the few times he's really spoken about what we call even potentially the day after the operation.
Right, because it wasn't tailored to an international audience. It wasn't tailored to a global audience. It was tailored to a European audience.
Oh, okay,
and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that himself, Caleb. Right. Listen, obviously, raising the stakes and widening the frame here to try to get support for Israel is absolutely the right thing to do. And obviously, terror is a threat far beyond the Middle East. In Europe, and of course, far beyond Europe as well. Terror is hit in India, in many other parts of Asia, certainly in Africa, and in every corner of the world. And certainly what happens here radiates outward. But I think that Israel's argument would be much, much stronger if Netanyahu, even in an oblique way, he obviously has to be very careful, but doesn't speak to the issue of terrorism, but speaks to the issue that's really on the minds of most of those ambassadors, the issue of Russia and the issue of China. Those are the geopolitical stakes where Israel needs to fit in, where it's really going to be able to mobilize support abroad, not by talking about terror, terror, and terror.
All right. Let's get back to the fighting there in the Gaza Strip. Hamas, of course, was well aware that the October 7th terror attack would lead to an Israeli operation in Gaza. They prepared themselves for this incursion mainly through the construction of hundreds of tunnels scattered all along the Gaza Strip, which are now being used to fight the incoming IDF forces. Our senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev examines the challenges rising from this extensive web of terror tunnels under Gaza.
This is the greatest danger awaiting the IDF forces maneuvering deep inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas terrorists rising from a tunnel dug under the ground firing anti-tank missiles or placing IEDs and quickly disappearing. Many of the Israeli casualties in Gaza were hit this way. Hundreds of such tunnels exist below the ground of the Gaza Strip, and those terrorists can pop up practically everywhere. And as is so common for Hamas, the presence of civilians is never a consideration.
Here you can see the IDF soldiers exposing a tunnel opening. This is part of an operation, a ground operation that was conducted on the hospital and revealed a tunnel that was being used for terror infrastructures in the Qatari hospital.
As the forces now go deeper into Gaza City, more and more such tunnels are being exposed. It is an extremely dangerous mission, as you never know what awaits below the ground, and those tunnels can rise up to the ground in every location.
אנחנו מעריכים שגם פה איפשהו יש חלק של תת-קרקע, אנחנו עכשיו ניכנס ונחשף, אבל ממש אפשר לראות את המתחם שיגורים מתוך הלונה פארק והפארק משחקים של הילדים.
This is the reason why heavy artillery is pounding on every area the army is advancing into, especially when there is intelligence regarding tunnels. That intelligence is superb, but no one has the illusion that every tunnel will be detected and destroyed. It means this threat will continue to loom on the forces operating in Gaza for weeks or maybe even months to come.
Ariel, those tunnels, that is the main challenge. That is the main target right now for the IDF. They say that they've been managed to damage some of those tunnels, mainly using even air power. But at a certain point, Israel's going to have to get in there, go down, and deal with the Hamas leadership, especially, that's hiding in those tunnels.
Right, Kalev. Look, the goal isn't to dismantle Hamas's underground terror tunnel system. That's not something that is feasible. There's thousands, hundreds of miles of this underground network called the Metro. But indeed, this is where many of, perhaps most of Hamas's fighters are currently hiding. They're operating from within these tunnels, which also serves as a means to get from point A to point B in the Gaza Strip without being identified. I mean, it's not only for operational purposes to exit a tunnel shaft, fire at Israeli forces, and then go back down. This is where they use, through these tunnels, they deliver logistics to units all across the Gaza Strip. That is also believed to be where they're hiding the hostages. And so as Israeli forces continue to go deeper and deeper into Gaza City, further into the Gaza Strip, more the role of the tunnels in the fighting aspect of the advancement of the forces, that will increase. Right now, every tunnel that is taken over, it is first it's surveyed, then it is destroyed. But indeed, you cannot go with the purpose of dismantling the system. I think the better way would be to identify how the system is operating and try to utilize it. I will just say that not only in the fighting are these tunnels presenting a challenge, also in Israeli airstrikes, because when you take down a tunnel system, it often causes a collapse of all structures above it. And many of these tunnels go under sensitive civilian infrastructure,
schools,
apartment buildings,
residential buildings.
And so many of the collapsed buildings that we see in Gaza aren't necessarily as a result of a direct hit from Israeli bomb, but often it could also be as a result of dismantling a tunnel from the air, and that causes a cascade collapsing, and that also becomes a threat not only to Israeli forces operating in the Gaza Strip, but also for the civilian population.
And that's where the diplomatic front comes in, Owen, because the IDF is going to need time to penetrate those tunnels, to neutralize that threat, and there will be civilian casualties. Palestinian sources, Hamas-run Ministry of Health claiming over 10,000 now killed in Gaza. Pressure on the U.S., especially for either a ceasefire or a humanitarian humanitarian pause, and the IDF needs this time to continue to deal with that threat, especially with the tunnels.
Yeah, it's the diplomatic hourglass that's always been known in Israel. But Caleb, the question is, how fast does the sand go through the hourglass? We're used in Israel in our wars and our conflicts and our past rounds of fighting in Gaza, especially for the pressure to ramp up over time, right? As the losses on the other side mount, as the damage mounts, that the line simply goes up. In this case, because of the duration of the war, I wonder whether the graph in a sense might level out, right? Given the fact of a kind of exhaustion abroad as this starts to sink deeper and deeper down into the headlines and the websites, in the newscasts and in the newspapers, if the impact of Israel's fight on public opinion abroad will already have been felt almost to its fullest over the course of this first month as we near the end of the first month of the war. Maybe the second month won't lead to an equal increase of pressure over time, but the pressure in a sense levels off over time and doesn't increase on day 40 and 41 and 42 and 43 at the same rate that it increased on day 11, 12, 13, and 14. So that's one way of looking at it. Again, it's an untested theory. Our conflicts in the past, our rounds of fighting, our wars haven't lasted long enough for this dynamic to set in. The question is, will it set in? No one's really talking about it. That's why I'm kind of putting it out there as a theory from the cold, calculating perspective of Israel and Israel's policymakers, in a sense, an optimistic theory, but something I think we should be on the lookout.
All right, another factor could be there is another conflict that is still occupying a lot of the world's attention, and that is the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and that may have been also factor into what you're describing there. Well, let's go down now to the south. Our correspondent, Robert Swift, in Sderot, right near the Gaza border. And Robert, IDF saying some fierce fighting going on, not far from you, just over that border there. Airstrikes, over 450 targets hit, Hamas targets, ground operations, and certainly it does seem as if the fighting just continues to intensify day by day right over the border where you are.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Interestingly enough, from where we are, it actually is a little bit quieter than you might expect compared to the heavy bombardment that occurred yesterday. And I think that's because essentially the Israeli military are driving deeper into the Gaza Strip. They are further into there than they were a few days ago, than they were a week ago. Now, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, made a comment regarding the Hamas's response to the Israeli approach, sort of mocking the commander of Hamas in Gaza, Sinwar, by pointing out that he was, in Gallant's words, hiding in a bunker whilst other lower-ranking Hamas commanders are being put into the field, and they are the ones that are facing Israeli artillery and airstrikes. And he pointed out that a number of Hamas tactical-level commanders have been killed in recent days, and that even some commanders who have been targeted and killed by Israel were replacements for men who had a short while earlier already been killed by Israel. So Israel really trying to put the pressure on the leadership of Hamas, trying to apply pressure not just in terms of the military impact on the ground, but also the psychological pressure on them. One of the things that Gallant mentioned was the fact that unlike Hamas, Israel has it prides itself in being a force that has its commanders at the front, and we're seeing that in the casualties that are taking place there on the ground in recent days.
In the meantime, though, Hamas still has the capability to fire rockets from Gaza into Israel, several rounds today. Here in the studio in Tel Aviv, we heard some very powerful booms. Reportedly, those were missiles that landed in the Mediterranean Sea, not far. So there is still that danger, even at this stage of the fighting.
Yeah, there is. I mean, the launches that you mentioned, those ones actually, the sirens didn't go off because the IDF systems noticed that they were going to go into the sea, and so there was no reason to launch interceptors. But there have been other launches which did require interception. A lot of Israeli civilians often in recent days have commented, why are there still rockets being launched? Why are there's still sirens going off in Tel Aviv? And the fact of the matter seems to be that even as the Israeli military pushes deeper into Gaza, it's now apparently circled Gaza City itself. But nonetheless, Hamas are still able to fire rockets. They still have that capability. deep within the urban maze of the Gaza city, they have launch systems, launch pads from where they can launch these from. And the Israeli military released video and photographs today of a rocket launch site that it captured, systems that had been deployed in and around a mosque, in and around a children's youth center. And these were systems that the Israeli military said were already pointed northwards, so they had been likely used on Ashdod, Ashkelon, and possibly even Tel Aviv.
All right, Robert Swift down in Sderot. Robert, stay safe, and thank you for that. In fact, Robert mentioned this footage released today by the IDF showing rocket launches situated in sensitive locations. He mentioned a youth club, a scouting club. We have that clip. Let's take a look at that.
We are in the scout club of the northern Gaza Strip. You can see here all the nice paintings of the nice scouts. And within the same room, you can see here, come with me, you can see rocket launchers aimed at the Ashkelon area or the northern region, right inside the scout club.
An area there, you see it in the, not just located in, you can see that it's actually kind of like built in to that Scouts Club. Basically using it, this youth club, Scouts Club meaning, you know, place for youngsters to congregate, and basically constructing it as a launch pad for rockets to be fired into Israel.
And yesterday the IDF released images of similar launch pads near a playground, near a residential swimming pool in an urban neighborhood. This, as the Israeli forces continue to advance, they will uncover more and more of these rocket launchers embedded within civilian population located near hospitals, near mosques we saw. But this isn't only in Gaza. I mean, just about a month ago in Jenin, Israel operated and struck right near a mosque that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad were using underground shaft there for their operations. And this is just a further illustration of the cynical use that Hamas and other Palestinian terror organizations use for their civilian population, knowing that when they go out, when they carry out an attack against Israel, when they come back, if they manage to do so, they will be hiding under or within sensitive civilian infrastructure, and that is expected to deter Israel from responding. And that tension is what we're seeing unfold in this war, and that tension makes it, on the one hand, very challenging for Israel to operate while minimizing civilian casualties, and on the other hand, it's challenging for Israel to explain it to the international community.
We're going now to Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson.
The fighters on the ground are advancing according to the operational program, continuing with their force around the city of Gaza. Our forces in recent hours with the 51 Battalion have taken down a number of terrorists in their movement in deepening the pressure on the city of Gaza. The IDF over the past day, with intelligence instructions, have eliminated during the night terrorists and commanders, among them field commanders of the Deir al-Balach area of Hamas, and the one in Hamas in charge of general security. All of those were eliminated throughout the night and the day, together with Israeli fighter jets and other commanders of the Hamas that were killed in this strike. Those who were involved personally in instructing the Nukba terrorists and planning the October 7th massacre. These terrorists are joining together with other members of Hamas that were taken down by the Air Force together with the ground forces. This significantly damages the ability of Hamas to hold counter-attacks. We will continue with targeting the terrorists on the ground and cutting the ties between them and the commandment of Hamas. The ground forces are operating in eliminating terror infrastructure. The engineering forces are arriving at the shafts of the tunnels in order to destroy them. Many of these shafts are located next to schools, hospitals, and humanitarian institutes. This is another proof of the fact that Hamas, out of civilian infrastructure, is cynically operating and threatens that population. They have taken down a military compound next to a mosque. The chief of staff held a military assessment at an Israeli Air Force base. F-35 jets are striking and assisting the ground forces up to 200 meters from where they are. Together with the ground forces, that is the same Air Force that is striking all over the Middle East against any threat and security interest of the State of Israel. In the Home Front Command today, the Shin Bet, the Yamam, have taken down 4 terrorists with the aid of the IDF, 4 Hamas terrorists in Tulkarem. Those were responsible of many terror attacks. Will continue to thwart terror attacks in the West Bank and security in the area of Judea and Samaria. In the north, we're striking with Air Force jets. A wide strike right now, together with other strikes that we held over the past day in response to the firing of 30 rockets towards the north part of Israel. We will continue to strike in response to any attacks on the State of Israel, in addition to the aerial defense. In the Home Front, we ask you to continue and follow the instructions of the Home Front Command. They save lives. The behavior of the people of Israel is saving lives. Maintaining the instructions, staying in safe zones until the interceptions are done, this saves lives. Continue to do so. At the same time, we continue to update on the website of the Home Front Command about all the instructions regarding educational institutes and return to normal. So far, we're giving notices to the families of 240 hostages. We embrace the families and continue to work with all the other institutes in order to bring them back home. We've given notices to families of 348 IDF soldiers who've fallen. Today, we exposed names of 349 fallen IDF soldiers, together with soldiers and police officers and Shin Bet operatives who have fallen in the battle for the State of Israel. Our hearts are with their families. I will take some questions now. Are the forces near the Shifa hospital? Are they planning to attack the hospital? When? We exposed the Shifa hospital over a week ago. We showed the world the way Hamas cynically uses, for years, uses the hospital as a hideout to terrorists. In medical compounds, they're using communication rooms to fight against the State of Israel and the ground operation, and also with the operations that connect to the tunnels. Therefore, Shifa Hospital is cynically used. This is a war crime of Hamas, using a hospital in this sense, and not just this hospital, but also other hospitals that we exposed yesterday in the Indonesian and the Qatari hospitals. We'll continue to expose them. All of these exposures are seen all over the Arab world, and the Arabic leaders who contribute this money to these hospitals dislike the cynical use that Hamas is doing of their funds for terror. We'll continue to operate deeper into Gaza City, to anywhere where terrorists are hiding. In every infrastructure, we will get there.
השאלה לגבי המנהרות היא שאלה
IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari giving his daily briefing. There was not much new information there, but stressing and reiterating the intense fighting going on now in northern Gaza and saying the IDF is making progress, but of course not giving too many specifics, especially in that last question regarding Shifa Hospital, believed to be really the central command of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And Ariel Daniel Hagari giving this briefing. As I said, not much new information there, just sort of confirming stuff we know. But still, and we should know, he's actually cut down his daily briefings. He was giving one in the morning and one in the evening, now cutting back down only to one in the evening. Clearly, IDF doesn't want to give out too much information now that the operation is fully underway.
Look, the fact that IDF spokesperson gives a daily briefing, that is something to be commended. It should continue. It did take the IDF a few days to get into this habit of sharing information with the public, but now that it has done so, it should continue to do so. Now, what's interesting is that as Daniel Hagari is speaking to Israeli ears and perhaps also of Israel's allies, and Al Jazeera airing a press conference of Hamas leadership. Obviously, they're not in Gaza when they're delivering this press conference. As they're speaking, they're showing the visuals of their videos attacking Israeli soldiers as the best propaganda they know how to do. But an interesting statement by a key official in Hamas, Osama Hamdan, answering claims that these attacks, that Israel's military advancement is hurting Hamas's military capabilities. Obviously, the big end goal being the demise of Hamas's military capabilities and administrative capabilities in the Gaza Strip. So Osama Hamdan saying clearly, Hamas will remain, just those three, Hamas will remain, that's their messaging, and no force on earth will be able to snatch it from its land and its people. And this comes as the people of Gaza continue to bear the brunt of Israeli strikes, airstrikes, and as Hamas officials are either abroad or hiding underground. This is another example to how they're saying, we will remain, we will stay, but physically they're not on the ground in Gaza. They're either below it or elsewhere across the border.
Especially in Qatar.
And by the way...
Well, we have to go out for break, I'm afraid, Owen, but we'll come back to your point when we're back. Stay with us on this special broadcast. We're on day 31 of Israel's war against Hamas as Israeli forces battle on in the northern, especially in the northern Gaza Strip. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I24 News.
broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël, the state of emergency and war in Israel. Bringing Israel's story to the world. I24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I24 News, day 31 of Israel's war against Hamas. Now, fighting is raging as we speak in northern Gaza. 30 IDF soldiers have lost their lives so far in the ground operation in the Gaza Strip. The most senior of those, it was Lt Col Salmanhabaka, commander of the 188th Armored Brigade's 53rd Battalion, killed in action on November 2nd. The 33-year-old Habaka hailed from the Druze community of Yanut in North Israel. He leaves behind a wife and 2-year-old son. Now, he had already distinguished himself in the fight against Hamas, racing south on October 7th to lead members of his tank unit into Kibbutz Be'eri, saving several lives there. Now, just ahead of his funeral last Friday, his widow, Aaron, put out a public statement asking that as many Jews as possible, especially from the north of Israel, come to pay their last respects to him. Well, joining us now is Tamir Habaka. He is the uncle of Lt Col Salmanhabaka from the Jat Yanut village. Tamir, thanks for joining us. And let's talk a little about your uncles. What a remarkable individual he was.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a huge loss to everyone here in the village and to my family as well. Salman was a great person. What can I say? He was a great father. He was a great brother. He was a great friend. He was a great family member. When we talk about Salman, we always think about a leader and how he always tried to lead in everything he tried to do. He joined the army and he showed that he is capable of helping and leading other soldiers. In our family, he always tried to push us to our best. And on the other side, he was very modest. If you sat with him, you wouldn't even know that he has this huge role in the army. So to us, it was a huge loss. He always tried to help others. It was crazy.
Right.
When it comes to volunteering, and he always tried to volunteer and support, especially the disabled people. He has a brother, he has a disability, so it was a very sensitive spot. And again, I could talk about Salman.
Well, let's talk about what he did first of all, on October 7th, when literally he came from one end of the country down to the other and put himself at harm's risk to save those people on Kibbutz Be'eri.
Well, Yanut village is really up north. It's close to the Lebanese border. So on the 7th of October, when the atrocity started, Salman didn't talk to anyone. He just took his car, went down south, and his main goal was to save as much as possible. He didn't even talk to his parents, not to his brothers. He told them, I have a job to do and I need to save as much as possible. We haven't seen him since then, and we always talked, the family members with him on the groups. And he always said, it's our job to stick together. It's our job to protect our country and our people. And he always said, he had two famous sentences that he always said: the man in the tank always wins. And when you hear the rumble of the tank, know that you are safe. And that's what he did. He tried as much as possible when he reached Kibbutz Be'eri to save people. He tried to push back the terrorists as much as possible back into Gaza. And after he succeeded, of course, in saving a lot of people, he joined the forces and he continued pushing them back into Gaza itself. And that's when it happened, like after 3 weeks, when on the 1st of November, he was killed in action.
Right. I was struck by this. He's from the Jewish community, and of course, there's something should be said about the sacrifices being made by the Jewish community throughout the history of Israel, of course, but even just over in the last month, something maybe should be said here about that.
Well, when it comes to us Druze, the Druze community is known for being loyal and being patriot for the country that they live in. To us, when we go back, it's something that people don't understand. We are Druze and we are Arabs, and what happened is not acceptable in any other way. And to us Druze, we never had a country other than Israel. Since the beginning of the country in 1948, nobody, just like people think abroad, nobody kicked us out of our land and nothing. We saw an opportunity to be a part of this great country, which is Israel. And we signed an agreement to serve a mandatory service in the army, because it is our duty to help our Jewish friends and to try to keep our country safe as much as possible, not just to our family, but to anyone else that lives here. I think that the main problem is that the world doesn't really see the main picture. When it comes to what's happening here in Israel, it's not. I even can't say that it's a war. In my opinion, it's a very bad attack that happened on Israel. And when we see what's happened so far, and we see pictures from both sides, and people don't understand that a lot of women and children were kidnapped, and they didn't do anything. And along the history of wars here in Israel, none of these atrocities have happened. Not a single IDF soldier butchered, killed, or did what these Hamas terrorists did.
Right.
When we say IDF, it's the Israeli Defense Force. Our main goal is to defend our people, our country, and other people from abroad really don't see that. And it's crazy just to see that from a citizen of Israel, that they don't understand that what happened is wrong.
Right. Finally, I want to ask you, because I did read this, so I assume it's accurate, that his widow put out this statement saying that not just family, friends, but invited especially the neighbors from Jewish communities there in the north to come join in the funeral, and the message that sent out about coexistence between the Druze and the majority here at this time.
Well, the main goal was to keep us all together, to keep us united against the main goal and the main enemy, and to show that we are together, we are all in the same boat. When it comes to the relationship between Jews and Druze, it all goes back to the prophet Jethro, and to us in our beliefs that every man, woman, and child had the right to live and had the right to defend their country and the place that they live in. Salman always had a good relationship with the Jewish people. Most of his friends were Jews. He even learned in a Jewish school. So to him, it was, and to all of us, of course, not just him, we're brothers. We're brothers in every way possible. It's either you're a Druze or a Jew. So.
Right, sure. Tamir, of course, we join in the mourning of your family and your community for Salmanhabaka. As we say, may his memory be a blessing, and it certainly sounds as if it will be. Thank you for joining us on I24 News.
Thank you very much, and hopefully that we will eventually vanquish this evil from existence, hopefully.
I'm sure if the spirit of Salman continues with those forces and those young men and women fighting down in Gaza, I'm certain that will be the case. Thank you for joining us.
Hopefully that the kidnapped people will be returned back, of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us. always the sacrifice that are being made by the IDF forces, which include Druze, which include Bedouin Arabs as well, down there in Gaza. It's just heartbreaking to hear that.
Look, Yanuch suffered heavy losses in this war. Another Lieutenant Colonel, Alim Saad, he was
killed on the Lebanon,
on the border with Lebanon, the third day of the war.
Right.
Both high-ranking officers, commanders, showing their soldiers that the commander is at the forefront, and this comes so it's not only a heavy hit, heavy blow to the community in Yanuch, but indeed it highlights once again the patriotic role that the Druze community bears upon itself in Israel, and it also highlights the tensions that are between the Druze community and the Israeli government in recent years, mainly revolving around the nation's state law. This is something that the Druze community has protested against, believing that it discriminates against minorities, Druze among them. And I think if there's something that not only Israelis but the world sees already at the beginning of this war, but it will see further as it progresses, that minorities of all different groups inside Israeli society take upon themselves to participate in the military in the most combat means possible. And two examples, Lieutenant Colonel Alim Saad and Lieutenant Col Salmanhabaka from the Druze community, just two examples of the bravery of Israel's minorities fighting within.
And the two most senior officers killed in the IDF in the fighting following.
Salmanhabaka in Gaza, and on the northern border, Alim Saad. Yes, indeed.
All right, let's go back to focus on Gaza. Now, Israel continues to urge Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza to evacuate from the main area of the conflict there and head to the southern half of the Strip. Now, the IDF did release drone footage today showing that some are heeding that advice along a humanitarian corridor established by the army. And they also released this footage hammering home the message for Gazans to head south to safety while they still can.
أنا موجود في شارع صلاح الدين جنوب حي الزيتون. احنا اليوم فتحنا شارع صلاح الدين كممر إنساني لمواطنين شمال القطاع. أنا بطلب كمان مرة لكل مواطنين شمال القطاع ومدينة غزة انزلوا جنوب وادي غزة. شمال القطاع ومدينة غزة هي منطقة خرب، منطقة خطيرة جدا. حماس المجرم الإرهابي بيستغلكم قدروا بشرية. انزلوا جنوب قطاع، انزلوا جنوب وادي غزة. احنا بنعطي السماح لإدخال المساعدات الإنسانية لجنوب وادي غزة.
Oh, and again, the IDF going, I would say, that extra mile to, first of all, to get civilians out of northern Gaza into the southern half of the Gaza Strip, which they say it will only be a target if there's something there that poses or a threat to Israeli forces, or there is a high target there. And also trying to make the case to the world and making clear to the world, this is what we're trying to do. We are trying to protect civilians, even though, of course, there are civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip that are tolling up.
Right, wanting civilians to go the extra mile, of course, not just the military going the extra mile, wanting the civilians to go the extra mile as well. Look, Kalev, assuming that this practice is legally defensible under international law, international humanitarian law, I think the wisdom has absolutely been borne out by events. Right? When it first dropped from the Israeli military, I think in the first week of the war, I think it just came as a shock to everyone. Right. Inside Gaza and far beyond. Right. There we're seeing people flowing south. Right, exactly. Along the humanitarian corridor that the military established and the military spokesperson was talking about. There in that video, so you can see the people walking, making their way from the northern part of the Strip to the south. At any rate, given the way the war is developed, given the way the operation is developed, right, you can obviously see the wisdom here and the early arguments saying, well, people are it's just as dangerous in the south as in the north. No one is safe anywhere. The military never said that people were going to sadly be 100% safe.
No.
Israelis, by the way, are not 100% safe. But the argument was made that it was safer, and I think obviously, events have borne out the wisdom of that, and you can see it on your screen with the people making their way south. We also, of course, have the episode, I think, from yesterday, but not just yesterday, of Hamas forcibly stopping people from making their way south, because from Hamas's purposes, the people are only useful as the civilians are only useful if they're human shields, and they're only really going to be human shields if they're in the northern part of the Strip where the brunt of the military operation is underway.
All right, and you can see, as you say, that's footage there, and hopefully more of those people in the north civilians will head to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Now, as we mentioned, there was a terror attack today in Jerusalem. A 16-year-old Palestinian resident of Arab East Jerusalem stabbing 2 border police officers at the old city's Herod's Gate, lightly injuring one but killing 20-year-old Sergeant Elisheva Rose Ida Lubin, who immigrated to Israel from the United States just 3 years ago. The attacker was shot dead at the scene. Nicole Tzedek was at the scene of the attack earlier today and filed this report.
Police officers here at the Shalom police station in Jerusalem, they are still on high alert, as this is exactly where 2 border officers were stabbed, right at the entrance to this police station earlier today. Now, the suspected terrorist was shot dead here at the scene. He was a 16-year-old boy from East Jerusalem. Now, not far from here, another suspect was detained and being questioned for his involvement into this terror attack. But unfortunately, this is not the first terror attack that this exact police station has seen within the past month. Just last month, 2 officers here were shot from another suspected terrorist. And because of all of this activity, you're seeing these police officers are on high alert, and they're adding security as well. Some of these concrete blocks, these were not here earlier in the day. Throughout the day, officers have been increasing security, not only adding concrete blocks to exactly where they are in front of the entrance, but also all along here. None of these concrete barriers were here earlier in the day, but throughout the day, they've been adding some of this increased security to add a small barrier between some of the residents and the police station. Now, I want to add, it's not just the security that we're seeing adding here as well. They're not just adding these concrete barriers, they're also adding dozens of Israeli flags. None of these were here at the beginning of the day earlier, but throughout the day, they've been adding dozens of these, lining both sides of the police station as a symbol of the Israeli pride that continues to be here. So even following a terror attack at this police station, not the first one and likely not the last, even though police officers are on high alert. They say they'll continue to wave the Israeli flag and protect the community here in East Jerusalem against any other suspected terror attacks. Reporting in Jerusalem for I24 News, I'm Nicole Zedek.
And Ariel, that attack in East Jerusalem, part of, let's say, a slight an uptick if terror events and activity in the West Bank in the last few days. That definitely has to have the security establishment in Israel concerned.
Look, if we didn't have the Gaza border or the northern front, we would say that the West Bank is burning.
Right.
But that's just, everything is relative in this reality. But indeed, since October 7th, Israel has carried out substantial operations throughout the West Bank. About 1,400 arrests, more than half of them belong to Hamas. And the images we're seeing today is from a targeted operation to take out 4 Hamas members operating in Tulkarem, that's in the northwestern part of the West Bank. They are believed, this terror cell believed to have also carried out attacks in the past, but also planning to carry out future attacks. And this is considered a significant elimination in cooperation between the military, the Shin Bet, and police. And it's just one example to daily, nightly incursions, raids by IDF forces, by special forces across the West Bank to try and stop or prevent Hamas from exporting their different commands and to the cells and different terror groups operating in the West Bank to try and activate them to carry away some of Israel's attention from Gaza. I think as the way Israeli forces are spread out right now, anything that happens or the current situation in the West Bank is one that it can handle without it averting its attention from Gaza or the northern border.
All right, certainly, hopefully, they're trying to keep a relative, like you said, it's all relative.
It's all relative.
What's happening in Gaza and in the north border, but hopefully the security establishment trying to keep at least a certain lid on what's happening in the West Bank. Now, we mentioned, we've been talking about the hostages, of course, 240 confirmed hostages by Israel. Many nationalities besides Israelis were impacted by that Hamas terror attack on October 7th. Perhaps none more so than the many foreign laborers from Thailand that work in the agricultural community in the Gaza border area. This perhaps is not getting enough notice. Thailand's foreign ministry has confirmed that at least 34 Thai nationals died in or as a result of that attack on October 7th, and 24 were taken hostage in Gaza. Here's the Thai Prime Minister today in Bangkok addressing their fate.
Last night, I had a discussion with the Thai Army Supreme Commander, and there's progress as there were photos of the Thai hostages. And we understand that at the very least, they're still alive. And we're also still negotiating for the release of the hostages. We're still considering when there should be a pause in the ground combat in Gaza. I believe that we need to consider that there can be a temporary ceasefire for about 1 to 2 days. That could be a window for the hostages to potentially be transported out. We'll have to see.
I mean, it just speaks, gentlemen, within and of itself of the indiscriminate nature of the slaughter and atrocities that took place on October 7th, that so many Thai workers were killed in the fields and were taken hostage in Gaza. But again, showing this is not an issue just for Israel. So many nationalities involved and victims of this attack.
Yeah, and the politics are intricate. You know, Caleb, in the opening days of the war, I said in studio, and I said in our broadcast, that Hamas, it's hard to imagine they understood what they were getting into when they took nationals of so many different foreign countries hostage in Gaza, and what that would mean for public opinion inside those countries, right? As the personal stories of those hostages would be told to the four corners of the earth. But when you step back and think about it, the politics are intricate, because what did we just hear from the Thai Prime Minister? He's negotiating with Hamas over the Thai hostages. And Israel's a third party here. Israel doesn't have much control over what it is that the Thais give Hamas in return. And this really came home to roost when we had those reports of the Russian government potentially giving Hamas weapons in exchange for Hamas releasing Russian hostages. So Israel is in the very, very difficult position, potentially, of being an interested third party to these negotiations, but maybe not having any power or any ability to influence the results. So obviously the politics here are very complicated and bear all of our attention.
Right, reportedly negotiating through Iran, I believe, in Thailand, and trying to see if they can release some of their hostages. We're looking there, that's live footage from Gaza. You can see, of course, obviously, that light going on in northern Gaza from fighting, strikes, fires there. We'll go down later in the program for an update on the report. But let's turn to the north now, because there was exchanges of fire still across that border. Zakan is in Kfar Vadim, close to the Israel-Lebanon border, and that front continues to be a hot one, maybe not equivalent to Gaza, but certainly of great concern to the Israeli defense establishment, Zach.
Well, of course, I mean, the direction that everyone is viewing, right, is in two directions. We're looking to the south, and we're looking here to the north, where Lebanon continues to turn into this hotbed of exchanges between Hezbollah, between different Hamas cells and other sympathizers of Hamas that have situated themselves on Israel's northern border. Today was a very active day here. In fact, we had a rocket that reached further into Israel than any other rocket since the 2006 war, in a barrage that saw about 30 rockets launched from Lebanon towards Israel. The IDF says they were all intercepted. This has been, of course, a very tense situation where you have most of the residents that have been told to evacuate are moving south. The Ministry of Tourism is providing the ability to have long-term housing and accommodations in areas that they consider safer than their current living in homes here in the north, which we see pretty consistent drum of artillery fire from an area close to our position. It's been quiet in the last hour. The last artillery launch was about an hour ago, and in that period, about 20 or so outgoing launches. We didn't hear any impacts, so that indicates to us that they were considerably further away from our position where we are. And the question that we have tonight, is that accompanied with ground operations? Is it accompanied with air operations as well? What exactly is happening in some of these areas right along the border with Lebanon?
All right. Again, some tension on the north there, and of course Israel trying to contain that. Hopefully that it will not have to divert its forces, of course, from its attention in the Gaza Strip and in the south. Zach Anders there by the Israel-Lebanon border. Thank you for that. Now, this is an interesting little story connected with the conflict in Gaza. As we mentioned, among the victims of the October 7th terror massacre were many nationalities besides Israeli and many different members of Israel's minority communities, among them Israel's Bedouin community in the Negev. Now, one of them was a young man named Osama Abu Asa, whose murder by a group of terrorists at a roadside shelter near the Gaza border was captured on video. Now his family, his Bedouin family, is vowing to take personal revenge on the killers, and they're offering a hefty reward for their identities. And Ariel, this is what we sometimes refer to kind of as a blood oath from the Bedouin community and from some members there.
Not just us, that's how they're referring to this as well. They're saying that we as Bedouins have a blood oath to close the tab with these terrorists. Anyone who has information regarding the terrorists that killed Osama, this is on the post that we're showing on the screen right now. We will offer anyone who has such information $1 million, and also given the fact that Israeli forces are going in to Gaza, this is something that perhaps could help the forces. But regardless, this is a small family, or a family from a small village, Tel Sheva, in the Bedouin community, and it's another example as to how this didn't pass the Druze community we talked about earlier, the Bedouin community. I will just note that there was another video released of a GoPro by Hamas terrorists that they found at the party in Re'im, the desert rave, that there were bartenders who were from East Jerusalem. These are Palestinian through and through. Their whereabouts are unknown as well. And so they did not take any sympathy on anyone who they came across, whether they were Druze, Arab, Palestinian even, and that's just another example to the ruthlessness that took place on the October 7th massacre. But here the family offering $1 million to whoever can help them bring their son's murderer to justice. All right, I want to Owen Alman, thank you for joining us. Sarah Lawson, please stay with us. We're going out for a brief break. We'll be back at the top of the hour in just about 3 minutes with more of our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. Stay with us.
In the heart of Jerusalem, researchers are hunting for the answers to aging and brain decay.
Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative disease, meaning that there are nerve cells, neurons in our brain that are the key functional unit of the brain that are dying. You look at a textbook on Alzheimer's, it seems like a lot of the mechanism is already figured out. But when you try and translate that to the clinic, it seems like something is missing.
But at the Edmund and Lilly Software Center for Brain Sciences, Professor Naomi Habib is finding out exactly what is missing.
Our goal is to find these early triggers of the disease so we can find effective therapeutics against them.
The cells that we see in this map, they come from hundreds of different individuals. Using this diversity, we can now try and put all of these donors along some disease timeline, or to try and learn some disease disease timeline. And we are finding that we have different of these trajectories leading to different disease outcomes.
And that is uncovering the answers to many long-standing questions.
What our maps show is that there are different paths the cells in the brain can take. One of these paths is where all the cells together are changing their functions leads to Alzheimer's. And the other path leads to the slower decline that we associate with more healthy form of aging.
And from the answers in Habib's lab, a path to a cure.
So we're measuring the brains of specifically these individuals, comparing them to people who have Alzheimer's, and trying to find what are the natural mechanisms of resilience.
And from there, a possible treatment for millions.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I24 News.
Welcome to, or back to, this special broadcast on I24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It's day 31 of the Israel-Hamas war. Now, the IDF continues to press forward in northern Gaza, saying its forces seized a major Hamas stronghold there, caused significant damage to its terror tunnels, and killed dozens of terrorists, including senior commanders, over the past 24 hours. This from both ground operations and airstrikes. Now, the cost was the life of another soldier, bringing to 30 the number of combat deaths in Gaza. part of the some 1,400 who have since lost their lives since October 7th, along with a confirmed 240 hostages. On the northern front, over 30 rockets fired into Israel from South Lebanon, along with drones intercepted by air defenses. The IDF responded with airstrikes and artillery fire at Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Terror also striking today in Jerusalem, with a border police officer, U.S. immigrant Elisheva Rose Lubin, stabbed to death by a Palestinian resident of East Jerusalem who was shot dead on the scene. Now, this conflict has regional implications as well. For over 2 weeks now, hundreds of members of Iran-backed Iraqi militia groups have gathered at the border with Jordan to protest Israel's attacks against Hamas in Gaza. They are demanding to pass through Jordan to reach Israel and Gaza in a move that has Amman deeply concerned. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more on these regional tensions in this report.
As pro-Palestinian rallies continue to spread across the West and the Middle East, there's one country where anti-Israel protests have gone one step farther than anyone.
Our main demand is to allow us to go to Palestine to help the Palestinians. Let them open the borders, and I will head there to fight or to provide moral or material aid. We are ready for anything.
For more than 2 weeks now, thousands of Iraqis have been amassing along the border with Jordan. In addition to showing support for Hamas's October 7th massacre, they demand free passage to reach the Gaza Strip, following a call by Iraq's influential Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr to hold sit-in protests along Israel's borders until it stops bombing Gaza. And Jordan, which has been one of the most vocal countries opposing Israel's strikes on Gaza, is worried that pro-Iranian militias in Iraq will try to take advantage of the situation.
We will not allow you to desecrate Jordan, and we warn the people of the Popular Mobilization Forces on the Iraqi border. If you come close, Jordan will be your graveyard.
Iraq's support of the Hamas-Iran axis comes as Tehran's proxies amplify their strikes against U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Baghdad and met with Iraq's prime minister to try and prevent the conflict from spreading further across the region. The following day, however, Prime Minister al-Sudani visited Tehran, reaffirming with whom Baghdad's real allegiance lies.
Those who want the conflict to be contained and not to spread to the entire region should pressure the Zionist regime to stop its military aggression and systematic slaughter.
Well, we're joined in the studio now by Reserves IDF Brigadier General Hanan Geffen. He's the former commander of Shmoni Matayim, the 8200 intelligence unit in the IDF, and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran. And Ariel, an update on this story, the Jordanian reaction to what's been happening there.
It would appear that the Jordanians' fears have come true, not in the fashion of thousands of Iraqis storming through their borders, but indeed a couple hours ago, Jordanian media saying that the Jordanian military intercepted a missile launched from Iraq aimed at Israel. They intercepted it over the northwestern part of the country. That would join them. By that, Jordan would join Saudi Arabia in being Arab countries who have downed missiles or drones or cruise missiles that were sent to Israel, either by Iraq or by the Houthis in Yemen, and have downed them. That is a very important point that needs to be remembered. And also in recent hours, pro-Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq saying that they carried out six attacks on U.S. bases in the region, raising the number of such attacks since the start of the war to 38 attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, a staggering number. So far, the American response has been very limited.
Right, but we should note today the U.S. military releasing a report saying it has dispatched a one of its nuclear subs armed with Tomahawk missiles, atomic Tomahawk missiles, reportedly passing through the Suez Canal. So the U.S. U.S. obviously trying to send a warning there. Another development, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, William Burns, coming to Israel. Hanan, no doubt you've dealt with situations like that. What would he be doing? What would let's talk about whatever intelligence cooperation or discussions we'll be having now between Israel and the U.S. and an official like Bill Burns.
Okay, let me shed some light on this level of communication, because we are exposed only to the one that is published on the media, and we see it on the media. You know, first of all, Israel is fighting in a war which is a very strange one. We are a terrorist organization in the middle of Gaza, doesn't care a massive population. The UN should take care of the Red Cross, not the organization. They are protected or shielded by the population. Now here's the intelligence and the gathering information, targeting very exactly is crucial, is the main point. You know, we have two cases during this 31 days. One was the hitting of Al-Mahmadani hospital, where they claimed that 500 people were killed there.
Initially, and then that number shrank to about 50 within the course of a couple of hours.
For 3 or 4 hours, all this operation was on brinks of collapse. But then Israel has the information and the means to pass it directly to its peers in the West, the US, the Britons, the British. And immediately everybody knew on the same page, knowing they are lying. So Israel was allowed, nothing happened, Israel was going on. Again, it was a case 3 days ago when a Red Cross ambulance was attacked. And again, it was very quickly it was established that it was carrying Hamas operative.
Right, trying to sneak them
down to Rafah, from Gaza to Rafah. And now, again, this information was passed on the same channels which are unseen. The CIA is appearance, the head of CIA visits here, just is an example of this kind of relation of exchange of information, which is vital for decision-making in the West, for the president of Biden and others, because otherwise we are exposed to the lies of the Hamas, the lies of everybody is lying. You just see the people that are gathering through the hospital, the media there, and they are running with kids. Sometimes the same faces around again and again with the same, just to show off cases of injuries. So the intelligence and the intelligence exchange is vital to enable Israel to keep on with this pinpointing.
Buying Israel, that intelligence information is buying Israel valuable time on the ground in Gaza.
That's one, and at the same time, it's a very accurate and reliable information.
Right.
You know, every day there are about 20 houses. They are claiming houses of citizens are targeted, and always these targets are verified. Various sources that are real target, authorized, and they attacked. And exactly the house that was intended to be attacked, this is the house that was attacked. This is the only way that Israel can survive in this impossible environment where this organization is shielded by innocent bystanders. After 30 days, they are not so innocent because they were warned time and again, leave this area because they are exposed to danger. Hamas exposed you to danger. So they know by now, they have every day 3 or 4 hours to escape. Who doesn't do it takes his risk. So
Right.
this is the way that the world, at least the Western world, let Israel to go on with this almost impossible task.
All right. Well, hopefully that will still be the case. But of course, one place where this very issue of being discussed, usually not to Israel's benefit, is the United Nations. And the Israel-Hamas war was again a topic of discussion and debate there. For more, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, who's at the UN, Mike, and fill us in again, both Israel and the Secretary General, whose comments have not always been helpful to Israel of late, making public statements.
No, none whatsoever. It's been a battle between Secretary General Guterres and the Israeli Foreign Ministry, specifically Ambassador Gilad Erdan here at the UN. This is in the wake of controversial comments that Guterres made a couple of weeks ago, essentially equivocating Hamas's massacre, at least blaming it on what he said did not occur in a vacuum over the last 75 years. Israeli politicos across the spectrum took offense to that mark to Guterres, and that offense has not gone away. Guterres made comments earlier on today calling the current situation not just a humanitarian crisis, but a crisis of humanity, noting the large civilian toll it's taken, not only on Gazan civilians at large, but also teachers, journalists, UNRWA workers, specifically the UNRWA death toll, the highest it's ever been in any conflict. He's calling for a ceasefire, period, bar none. Humanitarian ceasefire, no pause, no truce, nothing of that sort. Obviously, those comments are not going to be received well in Israel, and in fact, Foreign Minister Lt Cohen, together with Ambassador Gilad Erdan, have already rejected Guterres' statements today. They did so just moments after he left the podium. Guterres, though, did go into detail about recent meetings he had with the families of hostages who were being held by Hamas. He noted the compassion that was displayed by those family members, not only toward, obviously, their own situation, but to the situation that's unfolding across the border in Gaza. He wished more felt that way, though obviously Israelis would say that compassion is not being felt on the opposite side of the border, Kalev. Meanwhile, there's a meeting to happen here amongst Security Council members in a couple of hours under a closed consultations format to try to finally hammer out a Security Council resolution that's sufficient to pass muster. 4 prior resolutions have been floated, 2 by Russia, which did not garner the requisite votes needed, 1 by the United States, which was vetoed by Russia, 1 by Brazil, which was vetoed by the U.S. Malta is leading an effort amongst the 10 elected members of the Security Council to try to find a way forward here. There's language to be discussed, ceasefire versus truce versus pause, a language whether it condemns Hamas or not, language as to whether how far it goes in condemning Israelis' defensive actions. So much to be discussed here at the Security Council. There is a possibility of a vote tomorrow, although that all depends on what happens behind closed doors and the progress that can be made later on today here in New York, Khalif.
Right. I'm just going to add, Mike, you mentioned UNRWA and staff killed there. That's the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which is active in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. I'm just going to mention there was a report by the organization Impact SE today that monitors the Arab education systems of different countries for incitement. They just released a report today showing that 14 UNRWA staff members celebrated the October 7th massacre. A UNRWA supervised school in the West Bank held a rally to celebrate it. I think that's just something worth noting in this case. Mike Wagenheim there in the United Nations, thank you for that. Now, let's stay on diplomacy for a minute. Diplomatic relations between Israel and Turkey, which had been on the mend after years of tension, are now back in the deep freeze. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is back to attacking Israel, calling its Gaza operation, quote, one of the bloodiest and most savage attacks in history, the Gaza operation. He also defended Hamas as a liberation group rather than a terrorist organization. Now, against that backdrop, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a surprise visit today to Ankara. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alman takes a closer look at that.
They'll give a warm handshake and pose for the cameras, but relations between the United States and Turkey are as tangled as ever, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken sweeping through Ankara Monday, meeting with his Turkish counterpart, and capping his trip through the Middle East.
And of course, we discussed the crisis in Gaza, and including the efforts to significantly expand humanitarian assistance to people in need, efforts to prevent the conflict from spreading to other parts of the region.
In Turkey, that's a hard sell. Outside the Turkish Foreign Ministry, dozens came to protest Blinken's visit. And a day earlier, many more converged on the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey's south, where U.S. troops are stationed.
Both the police and soldiers would want to go to Gaza and fight, and they will go when the time comes. Turkish military to Gaza.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was notably not in Ankara for Blinken's visit, perceived by many as an intentional snub.
Filistinli kardeşlerimizin
It is our responsibility for our Palestinian brothers to be saved from Israeli cruelty and for the massacres happening in Gaza in front of the world's eyes to be stopped.
Turkey continues to host a number of Hamas leaders and has withdrawn its ambassador to Israel. But Erdogan has said he will not break ties with Israel fully. He has a Muslim world to try to win over, but also an American ally to keep on side.
Ariel, President Erdogan going back maybe to a position he's more comfortable with, which is as a critic of Israel and a supporter of Hamas.
In one of the previous operations in Gaza, I'm not sure if it was 2004, 2012, he already called Israel Nazis. He called them terrorists, a terrorist state. I mean, this isn't new. So the fact that Israel reestablished relations, diplomatic ties with Ankara, knowing that perhaps in any future escalation this could happen again, that does raise questions, but I think it shows that Israel's decision was pure interest related and not ideological, obviously. But the fact that Erdogan is once again showing his true colors, I think moving forward will force Israeli decision makers to recalculate Israel's necessity and need for relations with Turkey as long as Erdogan is still in power. He's been there for over 20 years. Doesn't seem like he's going anywhere.
And Khan, one thing we perhaps should not overlook is the fact of the, if you want to call it refuge or quarter, that President Erdogan has given to Hamas leaders and Hamas officials in Turkey over the years. Israel, that was one of the sticking points in trying to reestablish relations between Israel and Turkey. It's going to be one of the challenges for Israel that has sworn to track down the leaders of Hamas in the coming months or even years, is that many of them are not in the Gaza Strip. They're in Qatar, they're in Turkey, they'll probably be in Iran, and that's going to be a challenge getting to them.
Yeah, I think it will be a challenge, but we have that long breath, and we are, the Munich perpetrator. It took us, let's say, 20 years to go to the last one.
The ones that perpetrated the Munich Olympics massacre.
But we are, and we will go after them. They know it. And I don't think Turkey, it's a surprise. It's a country with, he supported Hamas from the beginning. He supported the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is a case that doesn't play for. It's a card that he cannot use in the Arab world because the Egyptian will be take part from him. Jordanians will be careful because he's representing a power that is a menace power to most of the other Arab countries. So we are in quite a good. Even the Saudis. I think we are in a good company in this relation.
All right. Let's bring the focus a bit back to the hostages now. The IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, confirming now the number of 240, that's confirmed hostages being held captive in Gaza. Their families continue to press the case for their release, here both in Israel and internationally. Now, today saw a protest by some of them outside the Israeli parliament, the Knesset in Jerusalem. Our correspondent, Lt Col Salmanhabaka, was there and filed this report.
Dozens of family members of those who are taken hostage are gathering in front of the Israeli parliament building to take their voices straight to the Israeli government. You have people speaking out for their loved ones, including someone who's on stage right now who's lost 12 members of their family, whether they were kidnapped or murdered. 12 members of one family. This is just some of the destruction and gives an idea as to what some of these families are going through and what they have been experiencing for the past 31 days. More than a month that their loved ones have been held captive by Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. And these family members, these friends, these loved ones are taking their voices to the Israeli government saying that their loved ones should have been released yesterday, 31 days ago. Akshan, now. You're hearing the chants of now. That is what continues to be repeated at this protest as they continue to hold the posters of their loved ones showing the faces of the victims, the 240 more than that are still held by Hamas. Now, many of the family members here, while they're expressing grief, they're expressing their sorrow. It's also a lot of anger, specifically towards the government for not doing enough. Now, one of the main calls that we're seeing as far as to get these hostages released as soon as possible, they're saying no more humanitarian aid should be let into Gaza to help the wounded Gazan civilians until medical aid is let into their hostages, until medics can go in and actually assess the situation for these 240 people that remain in Gaza held by terrorists, until a medic can see exactly the situation that's on the ground. They're saying no more humanitarian aid should be going through the Rafah border crossing in Egypt until they can assess the situation and really just get their loved ones home now. That is the main message of today's protest right in front of the Israeli parliament. Reporting from Jerusalem for I24 News, I'm Nicole Zedek.
We hear again, Ariel, families and loved ones of the hostages being held in Gaza saying there should be no humanitarian aid brought into Gaza until the release of the hostage, or even proof of life or something, Red Cross access to the hostages. But again, Israel, under that kind of diplomatic pressure, especially from its closest ally, the United States, to allow humanitarian aid, and also humanitarian aid coming from a different source today from Jordan, being airlifted into the Gaza Strip, something that's unprecedented.
Yeah, so the Jordanian kingdom airdropped from a cargo plane critical medical supplies for its field hospital located in the Gaza Strip. I also heard a report that King Abdullah II was supposed to be on that plane as it made the drop. Not sure exactly what led to the decision for him not to be over there, perhaps security reasons. But indeed, the issue of humanitarian aid is a sore subject for Israelis, mainly regarding the hostage situation, and also criticism towards the International Red Cross, that while it comes to Israel with demands to make sure that it maintains the rights of Palestinian security prisoners, Muslim terrorists, to make sure that it maintains their rights, so far it has not acted to get any sort of access to those 240 Israeli hostages. As far as we know, the International Red Cross does not know about their condition, has not seen them, does not have ability to see them, to reach them. And so this highlights once again the discrepancy between humanitarian aid going into Gaza, as well as a clearly humanitarian issue on the Israeli side, and that's the issue of the hostages.
Right. Hanan, you mentioned the achievements the intelligence has made in locating Hamas, top Hamas officials, sites, but the location of the hostages, that is the real challenge facing Israeli intelligence.
There's a very strong team of intelligence guy that works on it as a special task. From day one, they're tasked to look for it. They have one success with the girl that I don't know.
Or Megadish, who was the soldier who was free.
Yeah, or Megadish, yes. And there probably has more. We don't know.
Right.
What we know that, and by the way, there are more and more information coming. Just the other day, there was seemed to be that a young girl of 9 years old that we thought that she was dead, and suddenly they found out that she is one of the hostages.
Right.
So there's constantly coming information in, and a lot of efforts. Now, what we will see here, and this is a question, the Hamas has played his card, if you recall the Shalit, the previous exchange.
Right, hostage exchange.
Very cruel. It was a very cruel negotiation that they've managed to get from one soldier 1,000 prisoners. One of them is Yahya Sinwar, that right now heads the organization. So Israel will be. It's a very painful, and it seemed to be we understand it.
Right.
We see it as a very painful. We double checking what was it worth this action. So Israel will be very careful now. You know, we have different passports, children. Very careful how to do it.
All right, Hanan Geffen, Ariel Osran, stay with us. We're going out for a brief break, just a few minutes, but stay with us on our continuing coverage of the Israel-Hamas War, Day 31. We'll be right back.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
A month has passed since October 7th, the day Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas. A month since the Black Sabbath, when Hamas terrorists murdered over 1,400 Israelis, wounded thousands of others, and took 240 people captive. A month since the IDF entered a war against the vicious terrorist organization. A month later, I24 News returns to the place where it all began. Join us on November 7th, only on I24 News.
Welcome back to our special broadcast, I24 News, on the Israel-Hamas war, day 31. Now, Yoni Diller is a young Israeli with roots both in the United States and in Italy, who survived the Nova Musical Festival massacre on October 7th by fleeing into the desert, wandering for some 5 hours until finding a safe haven. Now, he's told that story already here on I24 News, but he's back now with us because he just got back from the United States telling his story there with those of other survivors on American college campuses and other venues, including such universities as Harvard, Columbia, and my alma mater, NYU, New York University, which unfortunately have been the sites of some extreme anti-Israel and, yes, you could say anti-Semitic incidents. He's also currently working on raising funds for IDF crucial needs and recovery for the vital infrastructure damage due to the terror attacks. Joining us in studio is Yonatan Yoni Diller. Thank you for joining us, Yoni.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, let's hear about your trip to the United States. Especially, I'm impressed that after the experience you had there at the Nova Festival, then to be able to just even travel and start recounting that to audiences abroad.
Well, I don't see I have much choice right now. There are certain ways to cope with such tragedy, such trauma. For me, it's just sharing and speaking about it. So I'm kind of in a mission, all right? I'm here speaking on behalf of the people who don't have the fortune to tell the story. For the people that didn't survive, for friends that were kidnapped, for the families that are crying. So that's my meaning. That's what drives me to speak And as a matter of fact, I did come from the States after a 2-week trip, speaking all kinds of campuses, like you said, Columbia, NYU, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and Yale, and speaking to the students. And hopefully it will make a change.
So let me ask you then, how did they react when you were recounting your own personal experience? As I said, you have fled in really, your life was that close to coming, but you did manage to get away from the massacre there. What kind of reactions when you're recounting that are you finding on campuses?
A month ago I survived the October 7th massacre. Right. You know, I'm not going to start telling the whole story, but really long story short, I've seen things that I really wish other people just not to see. I mean, it's things that I keep sharing and sharing because for me, it just makes me stronger. For me, it's just kind of it's very, very important to share that story and like let people understand who Hamas really is. What kind of terrorists are there? What did they do? Whether it's beheading babies or burning people alive, killing my friends, that's what I should tell. I'm not here to talk politics. I'm not here to give any history lessons. People should know, and people want to hear. Unfortunately, as you can see in America, there's big anti-Semitism wave. So my intention is this not to be. I don't want this to be a tsunami of hate, which is becoming that way because of the radicals. And campuses in the U.S. are not doing very well. Students feel afraid.
Yeah, what are you hearing from them when you meet with them and you ask them, and what are they telling you?
After I give my speech, my story, I try to give them some kind of hope. You know, kind of my main message for them is keep their head up, choose your battles. You know, when it's choosing to speak up, you gotta really be careful who you speak up. Always be aware of what's around you, and don't let anyone put you down. But again, you cannot be afraid. That's the last thing you should do, and we cannot afford that. And people do feel afraid. People don't have this self-confidence anymore they had before. I think there was, in my opinion, there was always anti-Semitism. Just, you know, October 7th, Pandora just opened, and I really feel the good feedback from the students. After I finish the lecture, I get all these positive feedbacks that they feel a lot more secure and more united, and that thing only gives me the drive to continue, and I will continue until I get tired of it. And that's kind of my meaning. So doing all these tours around the States was very impactful.
Right. Did you have any negative experiences? We hear stories. We see these incidents on college campuses. First of all, there's certainly the rallies in which people are singing Palestinian from the river to this will be free from the river to the sea. We see posters of the hostages taken, many of them from the music festival, being torn down. Many of those tearing them down are college-age students in America, college-age kids in America.
What I did with my friends in New York, we reprinted those posters. We edited them. We put all the names of my friends. We put them all in the city, all over the city, in Central Park, everywhere. Also in D.C. The people that I were with, they actually hired a truck that had the posters of the kidnapped on the truck, so no one can tear it because it's trucks that cost quite a lot of money.
Sure.
And they tour them around for more than 2 hours in New York and D.C. So I mean, this hate just continues and continues, and people are just addicted and are drawn to this propaganda. And like I always say, the truth is, like all the lies that have been spread for the last weeks, they spread much faster than truth and real based facts, and that's why I'm here. And it's kind of trendy, you know, to be anti-Semitic nowadays, unfortunately. And I don't think it's a matter of, you know, Jews, not Jews. There's no justification for what the Hamas did. And that's what I want people to know. And they cannot just put their head down. And people do feel afraid to walk outside, and they shouldn't. We're in 2023. And it's also really fascinating to see how in 2023 people refuse to accept the fact that Hamas did all this horrific massacre on October 7th.
Right.
And they're denying it because their hate of Judaism, of Israelis. And
what would you like to see happen now? I mean, what would be your advice to either those organs of the government or Jewish organizations, either in the U.S. or even those that are involved here in public diplomacy for Israel? What would you like to see to carry on this effort beyond just individuals like yourself going out and speaking your truth?
Look, as an individual, I think everyone has the influence to do anything. Okay, my 3 pillars, I would say, would first tell my story to whoever wants to hear it from firsthand. Number 2, I would say that I'm here to fight anti-Semitism by telling the truth and tell students and people how to cope with this hate and anti-Semitism by speaking up. And number 3 is raise money. So right now I'm raising money for IDF soldiers, working with all kinds of organizations. I think the Jewish organizations in the U.S. or just people that are friendly with Israel can donate and give their hand to anyone who can. And also, it's important to share the real facts. People are afraid to speak up because, again, there's all this hate and they're afraid of their lives, and they'll know that they support Israel, then they'll put them outside their social circle. And this is the point where we should be more united and do share these things. Whether that's the way to actually show the real support. So anyone has an impact. If I'm just a simple guy from Israel who survived this terror attack, and I'm here to tell the story. And if I can make an impact, anyone can make an impact. It's very as simple as that. And the last thing we should do is be afraid of these radicals. And they can continue being the radicals they are, because haters will be haters. So we have to just stand up for ourselves like we did all these years, and we'll survive this. It's just a matter of time. So I think personally, the more we get into Gaza and try to kill all the infrastructure of the terror of Hamas, this riots and the hate will grow. And that's why we have to stay strong and more united, more than ever. Because it is a modern second Holocaust, in my opinion. And it's going to become worse and worse. And that's why we have to keep talking about it and be more aware.
All right.
And I'm here to spread that awareness.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us and giving you the chance to spread awareness here on I24 News. Yoni Diller, keep speaking truth to power there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, 1 month after that Hamas massacre at the Nova Music Festival, a cameraman was for the first time able to film the many scorched cars belonging to the victims and survivors of the tragedy. This vehicular graveyard has now become a telling memorial of sorts to the horrors that took place there on the Gaza border 1 month ago, as we see in this report prepared by Alexandra Riai.
This huge open-air site bears the scars of Hamas massacres. Here, hundreds of scorched, bullet-riddled and ransacked cars belonging to the victims and survivors of the Nova Festival. On the ground, investigators are screening the whole area. Their objective? To identify the owners of the vehicles.
The first job is any cars that we found human remains in. We want to make sure that no human remains are pretty much being sent to the trash. So they go through and they sift through everything to try to find all the remains left. And the second thing is, if we have anybody who we don't know what happened to them, we don't know if they were murdered or if they were kidnapped.
An effort that has already paid off. Laura recounts how taking refuge with her husband and 5 friends in the caravan saved their lives.
We were in the trailer from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The terrorists tried to open the trailer, they shot at the trailer, they tried to burn it. They wanted to kidnap us, I think. I came because I'm trying to find answers to why all my friends are dead and I am alive. How did this plastic thing save our lives? It just doesn't make any sense.
Safe and sound, but still in shock, Laura hopes one day to find the strength to go to musical events again.
I've been wondering for a month if I'll ever be able to go dancing at a festival. I know that my friends who are no longer here would like us to continue. For the moment, I haven't got on with my life. I don't sleep, I don't eat. Sadly, it's still a long way from dancing, but I think it's our duty to a certain extent.
Noam Alon, who has also come in search of answers, is hoping for the release of his girlfriend.
We know that she tried to escape from the terrorists, but at one point she was caught because she couldn't keep running. Later, Hamas released a video showing 4 terrorists around her. We see her wounded. We hope she's alive. This is the last piece of evidence of her being alive. I came here today to ask our government to do everything in its power to bring back the hostages. Even if we have to release Palestinian prisoners, supply them with fuel, or sign a ceasefire.
A short distance from the site, investigations are continuing in Reim, where the Nova Festival took place. 270 people were slaughtered by Hamas on October 7th.
Gentlemen, just unbelievable to see just the remains of what happened there at the Nova Music Festival, and to hear this young man and to see what's happening abroad. I mean, we're fighting, Israel is fighting its fight here on its home front, which of course is the key. But what is happening internationally is also alarming, and is ultimately going to have an impact on what is developing here. The question is whether Israel is doing enough on that arena to support young men like who was just here.
Yeah, we have a real task. We are fighting. At the same time, we have these horrible stories. Some of them are not released to the public because they are so horrible. You cannot publish them.
A lot of questions about that, by the way, because anyone who goes on anyone who has gone on social media has seen some of these horrific pictures of civilians being paraded in, for example, Shifa Hospital and other hospitals of casualties of the kind of thing that Israelis will not allow of their children to be shown because of sensitivities.
Right. But you know, we are fighting here. It's the second part of the independence war. That's what we are really feeling here. Yoni mentioned the Holocaust. We feel like the days of Holocaust. We are in what we call in Israel, it's a no-choice war. We have to fight this war through. There is no way out. Whatever they are saying in the campuses of radicals or whoever, we have to fight this war through. So maybe we have to be more use young people with these capabilities. More than that, we didn't do enough in the past, but we don't have choice. So we have to demonstrate, to show to the world what kind of enemies we are dealing, what kind of people we are dealing with. And there couldn't be mercy here. We couldn't be, what we did in the last 20 years, we were so merciful. We were so considerate. We were so considerate with the Palestinians. Gave up time and again. We said, okay, maybe they will change. They did not, and we faced them in the most terrible...
Certainly that's the case with Hamas. Let's go down to the south again. Our correspondent, Robert Swift, who's there on the Gaza border. And Robert, again, it looks like another night of going to be fairly intense fighting there in northern Gaza. We'll probably only even hear, perhaps in the morning hours, how this developed. What's the perspective from down there, right near the Gaza border?
That's right. The airstrikes and artillery are continuing. As you say, most of this we won't actually understand the details until tomorrow, when the Israeli military is likely to announce which commanders that they've been able to kill with those attacks. This is what happened yesterday when there was some of the largest airstrikes that had occurred during the entire ground operation. Now, as this occurs, the Israeli military is continuing to tighten its grip on Gaza City itself, isolating it from the wider Gaza Strip. And it is making efforts to essentially demonstrate the victories that it's been achieving throughout the day, with Israeli ministers essentially taunting the Hamas leaders for not coming out and fighting, saying that they're essentially hiding in their tunnels, hiding in their bunkers, and also with the Israeli military showing off some of the rockets that it's been able to attack. They've been able to capture. Now, this is partly an effort to essentially show the victories that they're achieving, to reassure the Israeli public that the rocket fire that they've been subjected to night after night, that some of that capability is being removed.
Right, and incidentally, there hasn't been any rocket fire. I should be cautious about saying this because the night is young, as they say. But we have seen in recent days, usually at the hours of 8 and 9 o'clock p.m. here, especially in the Tel Aviv area, here in studio, alerts as rocket fighters come. We've not had that this evening. I don't know what to make of that, if that's an indication of anything in particular. particular, but perhaps it could be.
It could possibly be. Yesterday in Tel Aviv, there was a couple of rockets later into the evening than often there is. And like you say, there hasn't been any for the last few hours. We'll wait to see what happens with that. It could go either way, I'd say. In other developments, in the Gaza Strip, the UAE has just announced that it is moving forward with plans to try and open up a field hospital in the Gaza Strip to try and deal with some of the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding there. It's understood that the UAE wants to go into Egypt and move through the Rafah crossing to be able to deal with this.
Yeah, just if I may add.
Right. So, there are, Robert Swift, thank you for that. Now, we do have reports of sirens in northern Israel. There has been a rocket fire, 30 rockets fired today from the north, from terror groups, Hamas-linked and possibly Hezbollah-linked in the north. Also reports of drones. Those were intercepted by Israeli air defense systems. We are getting reports now of alerts in the north. We'll bring you updates from that if we can. I want to go, Ariel mentioned we just heard Robert mention this report now of the UAE setting up a field hospital. I presume that would be in the southern Gaza Strip, done in coordination with Egypt, or perhaps right over the border perhaps in Sinai. And this, of course, has been a lot of discussion in the past few days, how to find some kind of alternatives to those hospitals in the northern Gaza Strip that Hamas has been using as command centers and have been targeted by the IDF. This apparently looks like to be one of the solutions on offer, perhaps.
And this is why Israel, the IDF, has announced not only humanitarian corridors moving south from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, but once they're in southern Gaza, not everywhere is safe. There's a specifically allocated part on the coast called Al-Mawasi. It's in the southwest part of the Gaza Strip, and that is where the humanitarian aid is being sent. I would imagine if this once this 150-bed field hospital is established, either in Mawasi or, as you mentioned, along the border near Rafah.
All right, I do want to jump now to our correspondent near the Israel-Lebanon border in the north, Zach Anders. Zach, reports of air raid sirens going off, I believe, more in the area of the eastern Galilee, somewhat to the east of you.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well, and these alerts are similar to what we saw earlier in this evening with that rocket launch, 30 rockets intercepted by the IDF. We're waiting for confirmation from the IDF at this hour to tell us where these red alerts are, if this is the confrontation line, because this is so close to the border, and we have been seeing a considerable amount of ground activity. There's been artillery, there's been IDF engagements that they have confirmed they are working the ground operations here on the border, and they have also told us that there have been airstrikes as well. So it does appear that from what started earlier this afternoon with those rocket launches has continued for the last few hours. Now, from our position, it's been fairly quiet. There is an artillery battery that's close to us that was working heavily in the 7 o'clock hour. It has since quieted down, but as you'll note, this red alert is now further to the east, and the confrontation line has moved further east now.
All right, Zach Anders there in the north of Israel, right below the Lebanon border. We'll come back to you for updates later on the situation developing there in the north. And this is, of course, is the question, Hanan, Hezbollah, how far are they going to go here? This kind of rocket fire we've seen, longer rocket fire it seemed today. What's the red line here, perhaps, for us or for Hezbollah?
So, yeah, it's a little bit intensified, but still they're keeping the lines. You know, the Palestinian fraction are targeting civilian targets in Israel. They are the Hezbollah itself keep to attacking only military targets so far, and
except for that truck the other day.
Yeah, but because this was a kind of retaliation for a civilian one
on the Lebanon side of border, supposedly.
Side. So the level it's the same. I would say, if you ask me to guess, my guesstimate right now.
Okay, well, that's an informed opinion, so yes.
Yeah. Okay. What if I was Nasrallah and he's sitting deep in the bunker? He has a lot of time to think and hear and so on. On one hand, he understands that Israel is in a crazy mood. Israel is an unexpected mood. Nothing that he knew in the past. The answer Israel is giving is nothing that he knew in the past. He understands that there are also the Americans there in a way that they've never been here with all this flotilla here, the Navy, and the warning that Hezbollah shouldn't enter a war. So this kind of thing. And the last thing he wanted to know is to try Israel in this crazy mood with all the Americans here around. I guess, and you know that his infrastructure is exposed to Israel, all his Lebanon's infrastructure. So it's a long shot.
All right, well, let's hope so. But, of course, a lot of the same things you just said about Hezbollah was said about Hamas prior to October 7th.
Yeah,
and
we have all the army there.
Yes, one last point.
Yeah, and I will note that in the beyond just the exchange of fire and I agree, it is being limited to a threshold along the border. Hezbollah has begun in recent days also targeting the border itself, causing breaches in the border fence. The army says that first it said that it was looking into it, then it said it is not commenting on this, and I think that explains why this morning, in addition to the barrages of rockets yesterday with direct impacts in Kiryat Shmona, that is another reason why leaders made the decision today to evacuate the city of Kiryat Shmona, 22,000 people.
Sure. All right. Well, I just want to point on your screen, you're seeing that in the background there, that is the skyline above Gaza, northern Gaza. You can see the sky lit up there, flares, fire, perhaps rocket fire, a sign that this is another evening of perhaps heavy fighting in and around the Gaza city in particular. Reports of IDF forces making advances there, and of course some details. When details more come out about that, we'll go to it. Let's we're coming to the end of this hour. Let's we focus on the hostages and a moving installation that was done this evening in Tel Aviv. Our correspondent Mary McAuliffe was in Habima Square and filed this report on that.
Displays of hope, but also outcries for help from the global media attention to pay attention to the over 240 hostages who remain held inside the Gaza Strip for over 30 days now. Here in Habima Square, there's yet another massive demonstration with Israelis coming from all over to take part in a show to show their solidarity, but also to call to make sure that people do not forget these 240 hostages. And they're not just doing this with words and prayers and songs. We've seen numerous different performances, but it's also a visual performance here inside Habima Square. Behind me, you can see over 240 beds. All of these beds represent the number of hostages who are still held inside the Gaza Strip. A very powerful visual message here in Habima Square. It's just one of many different installations that we can see all throughout Tel Aviv, calling by the families of these hostages to bring them home now. They're trying to put pressure on the Israeli government, but they say they're also trying to call out for those around the world to pay attention and to not forget about them, as they again are sitting for over 30 days inside the Gaza Strip. Most of the loved ones of these hostages still have very little signs of life. If they're alive, any messages of hope coming from within, most are just left to wait and hope that everything will be okay, and that hopefully soon they will hear some kind of message from them or any kind of sign. But for now, they're taking comfort in the comfort of others, the solidarity that they're all coming out to show one another, to stand hand in hand together as Israelis, calling for their release, calling to bring the hostages home now. Mary McAuliffe, Tel Aviv.
Are the four most important words right now. Bring them home now. I want to thank Hanan Geffen and Ariel Osron, our Middle East correspondent, for joining us in studio in this hour. Tomorrow, there'll be a special broadcast. The first hour of this time slot, this program, from 8 to 9 Israel time, will be hosted in studio by Benita Levine. And the second hour, that's from 9 to 10 Israel time, we will be doing a special. I'll be down in Sderot, hosting, anchoring 1 hour of the programming from Sderot, right by the Lebanon border. We leave you with those images, flares. Over the Gaza border. I'm sorry. We leave you with those images, flares lighting up the sky above Gaza City. fighting still going on there as Israel presses on in day 31. 1 month of Israel's war against Hamas draws to a close. Stay with us on our coverage on I24 News. Thank you for joining us.
A month has passed since October 7th, the day Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas. A month since the Black Sabbath, when Hamas terrorists murdered over 1,400 Israelis, wounded thousands of others, and took 240 people captive. A month since the IDF entered a war against the vicious terrorist organization. A month later, I24 News returns to the place where it all began. Join us on November 7th, only on I24 News.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I24 News.
This is Breaking News Edition. I'm Benita Levine coming to you live from Tel Aviv. Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's war against Hamas is not a local battle, warning that if the Middle East falls to the axis of terror, Europe will be next and no one will be safe. The Israeli Prime Minister telling dozens of foreign ambassadors in Jerusalem that, quote, our victory is your victory. Day 31 of the war. Tomorrow marks exactly 1 month since the Hamas terror rampage in southern Israel, in which more than 1,400 people were shot, tortured and butchered. Thousands more were wounded. The terror group is still holding 240 people hostage in Gaza, including babies, children, women, and the elderly. Earlier on Monday, a border police officer was killed in a stabbing attack near Jerusalem's Old City. 20-year-old Sergeant Elisheva Rose Ida Lubin from Kibbutz Sa'ad in southern Israel was a lone soldier from the U.S. Meanwhile, the number of soldiers killed in the IDF retaliatory operation to eliminate the Hamas terror group in Gaza is now at 34. The IDF saying today it had killed the commander of a Hamas battalion in Deir al-Balach in an overnight airstrike in the Gaza Strip. It published a video showing that airstrike. It's there on your screen. The IDF also causing significant damage to the terror group's underground terror tunnels. Tunnels its leadership admits in an international TV interview are for its fighters and not to protect its civilians. Rocket fire emanating from the Gaza Strip once again, with sirens sounding in the communities in the south and sirens too in the north just a short while ago, including in the Upper Galilee. In the northern city of Kiryat Shmona, residents have been urged to leave as it continues to be targeted by rockets from Lebanon. Here's more from the Prime Minister in recent hours.
If they go strong, if they're not defeated, they will derail this process. They will imperil the entire Middle East. If the Middle East falls to the axis of terror, Europe will be next, and no one will be safe. This is not a local battle. This is a global battle. The paramount need is to defeat this axis. That battle is now being waged by us against Hamas in Gaza. There is no substitute for victory. We will defeat Hamas, we will dismantle Hamas, we will offer the people of Gaza and the entire peoples of the Middle East a real future, a future of promise and hope. But this requires victory. We have the will and we have the power to do so. We will win. And we believe that all civilized powers should back us in this effort, because this battle is your battle, and our victory is your victory.
So for more insight, we welcome to studio Dr. Fadi Ismail, a former senior staffer in the US Congress and research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, and our senior editor, Guy Israel. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being here in studio. And Guy, I'm going to start with you and new updates. The IDF confirming in recent hours that rockets have been launched from civilian targets inside the Gaza Strip. Not a surprise to too many in this part of the world. Nonetheless, those locations weren't only a hospital and a mosque, there were others. Bring us up to speed.
There's nothing new there, but more proof, and especially now when the IDF is in there, we no longer need to rely on intelligence information about pictures, about even aerial footage. The IDF is in there, and today the IDF destroying 50 rocket launchers, this time inside a Scouts club. Let's take a look at the IDF officer inside this Scouts club explaining what we're seeing in front of our eyes. Still waiting for that. All right, so I guess we'll get to see that very soon. In any case, let's take a listen.
We are in the Scout Club of the northern Gaza Strip. You can see here all the nice paintings of the nice scouts. And within the same room, you can see here, come with me, you can see rocket launchers aimed at the Ashkelon area or the northern region, right inside the Scout Club.
Yes, so just another illustration of the cynical use of Hamas of its civilian infrastructure, and it goes together with statements that we heard just this evening from IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari about the use of hospitals. So yesterday they demonstrated the use of the Indonesian and the Qatari hospitals, and just last week the IDF revealing images of the Shifa hospital and the well-built underground tunnel system out just under that hospital, the main hospital in Gaza, where Hamas is believed to have its main headquarters. Also, we're understanding that it moves many of its senior operatives from one place to another in these tunnels. We're talking about many, many miles of tunnels underground that allows Hamas to operate very freely under the civilian infrastructure, using the Gazan civilians as human shields.
And as we said a little bit earlier in an interview on international television, we heard a Hamas official saying those tunnels are for Hamas fighters and not to protect its own civilians. We're going to come to you, Fadi, for more insight as well. But right now, I want to find out what's happening on the ground in the north. Let's go live to our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us from northern Israel. So, Zach, sirens in recent hours in the north, including in Shtula, Rosh HaNikra and Shlomi, warning of incoming rockets or missiles. And earlier, that major barrage of around 30 rockets out of Lebanon. What is the latest where you are? What can you tell us?
Well, the latest is that there's a red alert in Kiryat Shimona where the confrontation line is listed right with the Lebanon border. There has been IDF confirmed ground operations and airstrikes in the 7 o'clock hour. We heard heavy artillery from a position near to us, and it was quite distant. We didn't hear any impacts telling us that that artillery was targeting deep from our position close to the Lebanon border. Now, like you mentioned earlier today, that rocket launch from Lebanon was one of the more pivotal, you could say, moments of the conflict here in the north, because one of those rockets slipped further into Israel, northern Israel, than any rocket has since the 2006 war. That's a major development here. As this has been categorized, mostly the language that you'll hear is skirmishes, but in normal circumstances 3 months ago, if something like this was happening, we would be calling this full-blown exchanges. But because of the situation, because of the statements from Hezbollah as they tiptoe their way around the confrontations here, this continues to be relatively isolated in these pockets of confrontation on the border. But it is still a major development to see the exchanges of fire. We haven't been able to confirm who exactly the IDF is targeting, because Hezbollah has not been coming out and confirming or claiming responsibility for some of these engagements, or claiming, at least in the last 24 hours or so, that their fighters are on the other side engaging with the IDF.
And a report coming out a short while ago saying the Hamas leader in Lebanon, Osama Hamdan, saying Hamas will not accept a puppet government in the Gaza Strip and will remain in the territory. So we are going to have to leave it there, but appreciate that update for now. Thank you very much to our correspondent, Zach Anders, live from northern Israel. Be safe. Still with us in studio, Dr. Fadi Ismail. So I'd like to unpack, before we get to other issues, exactly what we just heard about the developments on this day from the north. So much has been made about Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah, what he was going to say, allude to on that Friday speech. He stopped short of saying it's a full-out war. Nonetheless, not everyone's convinced that Hezbollah is deterred. What do you make of what is happening out of Lebanon right now?
I've just come back from the north. I just arrived, and I was in 2 funerals in one town of 2 officers. One a lieutenant colonel, actually both of them lieutenant colonels, who were killed the last 2 weeks. They are deterred. Who said they were deterred? I've been talking to generals, IDF generals today. No one in the army thinks that they're deterred. This is just to speak. In reality, they are literally on the border. They're right there. They can do a lot of harm at any minute. They have the ability to go from 0 to 100 actually with one simple command. They can do that. Nothing is deterred. Some people, for some reason, thought that Hassan Nasrallah's speech was, I even heard the words moderate. There's nothing moderate there.
Not a word one often hears with Hezbollah, right?
I actually heard people use that word. So let's get serious here. Iran, we say Hezbollah, it's Iran. Iran has moved tens of thousands of troops. They are amassing on the northern border. There are tens more of thousands of them. They are finding alternative ways to get into Syria because Israel has bombed the airfields there. So now they're using the Russian airfield. Now Russia is very clearly on the side of Hamas and Hezbollah. Very weird choice for them as far as I'm concerned, but okay, they have to because they need the Iranians. They keep on sending convoys into Syria loaded with heavy weaponry. They send people, they send everything. So you don't do something like this that costs tens of millions of dollars. The deployment costs tens of millions of dollars just for exercise. You don't do that.
Right.
This is money that is basically an investment. Now, Nasrallah said something interesting. He basically established a formula that ties the depth of his skirmishes with IDF to the depth of Israel's penetration into Gaza. To people who love game theory, like myself, it looks like he established a new formula with the players, the rules, and the new payments. That's what we call it in game theory. I think it's just a smokescreen.
Right.
The idea that some people have that we have a new order right now, no, there isn't. The man can, this is his style. He can just go from, as I said, from 0 to 100 in a minute.
Right.
And maybe he was trying to lull Israel into some sense of I would say security, but a sense of clarity. You know, one of the biggest things that fog at war is that you don't know what's going to happen, and that messes with your decision process. I don't think anybody bought into this from speaking to very high-ranking officers and IDF officers. I'm telling you, nobody, and not only IDF officers, also in other security establishment, also in other forces, Americans and so on. Nobody's buying that. If he tried to use some ruse here, it didn't work.
Certainly, there's no doubt that the IDF is vigilant on all fronts right now. Stay with us. We've got much more to discuss, but right now I want to focus on the hostages, and we go to Florida. We welcome Benjamin Anthony, the CEO of the Miriam Institute. Benjamin, thank you very much for joining us. As you well know, tomorrow marks a month since the Hamas terror rampage. You'll be at an event in Manhattan to show solidarity between the American Jewish community and the Israeli families, both those who lost loved ones who were murdered by Hamas and those whose relatives are still being held in Gaza. It's just unimaginable a month later. Tell us more. What is happening where you are?
First of all, thank you very much indeed for having me. I appreciate your time. I've flown in from Israel and I'm here in Florida, and tomorrow I'll be in Manhattan. And the story actually begins in the I24 studios, because sitting next to me during a segment I appeared in was Gal Gilboa Dalal. And he is the older brother of Guy Gilboa Dalal, who was kidnapped and who was filmed in captivity inside Gaza by Hamas. He was giving his testimony to you in studio, to your team there. And I reached over to him and I said to him, I want to help you. I want to try and assist you. I want to do whatever I can. And together with my colleague, Rosie Tzplin, and our team here at the Miriam Institute, we decided that the Israeli Defense Forces, the supplies, the food, everything that we were supplying to them up until this point since the outbreak of the war, we've done everything that we can there for now. We'll probably resume that soon enough. But there's a terrible tide turning when it comes to public opinion here in the United States of America, and we need to do our best to stem that tide. And so Gal is traveling to the United States. He'll be arriving in Manhattan tomorrow, and we will be having a community-wide event with him so that he can tell his story to the New York community. And he will be joined by Doron Epstein, who is a surviving member of a family. His brother was murdered, his nephew was murdered, and 2 other members of his extended family were murdered. And after they bear their testimony in Manhattan, we'll be taking them to Capitol Hill on Wednesday of this week, and they will be briefing congressional staffers on a bicameral, bipartisan basis, as well as elected officials, to really go directly to leadership and to have the leadership stay the course when it comes to supporting the state of Israel and the members of the Israel Defense Forces.
Well, certainly kudos to you for taking on this initiative. What kind of response have you had so far out of the US, and how important is it that these brave families tell their stories, difficult as it must be for them right now?
Yeah, that's such an important question, because you ask them, each of them, to prepare comments, to prepare a speech, to ready themselves for what it is they want to say. And as you read through their prepared comments, you realize, of course, that they come to this completely unprepared. Life doesn't prepare anybody to experience the horrors, the anxiety, the worry, the disbelief, the consternation, the anger, the frustration that everybody is feeling. I think that what they are able to do that nobody else is able to do, of course, is to give a candid response, to speak from the heart, to speak from the head, and also to say that their story and the story of those who have perished, who were murdered, and those who are in captivity, those stories must be heard, they must be listened to, and they must tramp, quite frankly, the nonsensical anti-Israel messages that are running rampant throughout the United States of America, most notably, incidentally, in Manhattan, New York, the stronghold of the largest diaspora Jewish community in the world. I think it's very important that these messages get heard, listened to, internalized, and really supersede all of the hate speech that we're hearing on campus right now.
And very briefly, what do you make of the latest out of those American campuses? Disturbing to see what is transpiring, seeing visuals of people taking down pictures of those who have been held hostage. What do you make of the sentiment, your sense there out of the US right now?
Yeah, I think it's plain Jew hatred. I don't think that anybody should be giving these people a pass. The people who deny our right to draw attention to the plight of our people at this time are dealing in Jew hatred. They're denying the Jewish people the right to grieve. They're denying the Jewish people to be reunited with their family members. They're denying the Jewish state the right to defend itself. And all of those are indicative of a deep, deep bigotry towards the one and only Jewish state, which, in my opinion, is tantamount and precisely the same as a deep, deep, deep bigotry toward the Jewish people. It cannot be tolerated, mustn't be tolerated, and it mustn't be excused as hyper-intellectualism or thought processes gone wrong. This is deep, deep hatred towards the Jewish people, something that I grew up with in the United Kingdom. But now we've seen that it's taken roots and branch on the campuses in America. And my great fear is that those campuses, those students who are on those campuses, they will be legislators tomorrow, and they're being educated in environments that are hostile towards Israel, hostile towards the Jews. And we absolutely have to battle back against that. And that begins tomorrow with our work with these two brave representatives, Dawn and Gal, who will be telling their truth, their absolute truth, to anyone and everyone who's willing to listen.
Thank you so much, Benjamin Anthony, the CEO of the Miriam Institute, live from Florida. We will be following developments. Thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Fadi, you know the US well, you know Israel well. What do you make of what we just heard there? The plight of these families waiting for word on their loved ones still being held captive inside Gaza, going out to tell their stories in the US. What kind of response do you think they'll be receiving when they get to Washington specifically?
Okay, the language you've just spoken is English. The language that the kinds of people it talks about in campuses across the United States today is woke. That's an entirely new language. They think differently. They understand the world differently. They honestly believe in the, I don't want to use words that I can't use. It wasn't born yesterday. We've seen the beginnings of this kind of change in American culture already in the late 90s, early 2000s. But there is something that has been brewing on the West Coast in the Northern California universities and so on that had to do with controlling the language. The idea that controlling terminology and the meanings of words, and I know I'm becoming philosophical now, but that's what it is. You have to understand it on those levels. And with a lot of love to to Benjamin, who just spoke now, I think, no, there is an issue of hyper-intellectualism here. Yes, it's used to cover some deeply seated other issues from other centuries, but there are many people who fall into this trap of using the language in ways. Look, today we can't even tell, and how people are going to jump all over me. We can't even tell what is a man and a woman. We're at that place. And I'm not attacking anyone. That's truth today. We're at the place we cannot even define those biological facts and social facts, if you will. So now he is going to go there and try to explain to them a reality of war. Yeah, in Congress, there are many good people, I promise you. And among the staffers, there are many good people. But again, these new college graduates, where they need safe spaces, where they believe that a word endangers their safety. How do you talk to them about, again, I'm trying to clean my language. How do you, because we're on air, How do you talk to them about these ISIS-style marauders and killers who just rape dead women? You know, how do you explain that?
Well, you say, how do you explain it? These videos went viral. Hamas videoed what they were doing, the carnage, the brutality. They filmed it, and they wanted the world to see.
Let me tell you something. Not only that they filmed it, there are some. We didn't show everything to the world. Some of it is still heavily controlled by IDF. The images that were taken from the bodies of terrorists with the GoPro cameras, some of those images were not released to the world, and they're just shown on very controlled environments, like recently to members of parliament. The Knesset physician had to sedate some of the parliament members before and after watching those images that have not, most of them have not reached the public. But again, to them, these are, the colleges today are filled with young brats, I think I can say brats, that really believe that if somebody argues with them with a fact, just argues it or presents a fact they don't like, then they are all of a sudden unsafe and they need to run away and cry to mommy. This is what we have today. So when somebody manages to frame the picture in a binary way, because that's what all they can handle, they always need an evil side and a good side. There is always Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and these are the big ones, these are the strong ones, and these are the weak ones, and therefore, by definition, you are the Darth Vaders. That's the depth of what you're dealing with here. Now, on a positive side of it, I think that if we go away from that the pseudo-intellectual world that we talk about, out into real America, what I call real America, the in-between states, if you go to the hard-working, mortgage-paying America, I think you will find a very, very different picture. I received messages, actually I just received online from a friend in California who's watching us now. Hi, Kathleen, if you're watching us. She's talking about parallel universes. I mean, these people live in a parallel universe. We have to address that, however. We have to address that new generation because, as Mr. Benjamin has said, clearly they are going to be the people in charge. But something happened to people once they start paying mortgage. And all of a sudden, maybe something will change by the age of 30, 32, 35, I don't know.
Again, I'll say it again and again. Hamas videoed this, and a generation that spends a lot of time on TikTok.
Again, you're speaking facts. That's a problem
on cell phones, on videos. It's difficult to watch that and not feel. When you see the pictures of the hostages, when you see babies who are being held captive by terrorists, you cannot not be moved. Talking of which, in Tel Aviv, a moving installation, stage actors telling bedtime stories to empty beds, symbolizing at least 240 hostages still being held by the Hamas terror group for more than 4 weeks now. Our correspondent, Mary McAuliffe, was in Habima Square and filed this report.
Displays of hope, but also outcries for help from the global media attention to pay attention to the over 240 hostages who remain held inside the Gaza Strip for over 30 days now. Here in Habima Square, there's yet another massive demonstration with Israelis coming from all over to take part in a show to show their solidarity, but also to call to make sure that people do not forget these 240 hostages. And they're not just doing this with words and prayers and songs. We've seen numerous different performances, but it's also a visual performance here inside Habima Square. Behind me, you can see over 240 beds. All of these beds represent the number of hostages who are still held inside the Gaza Strip. A very powerful visual message here in Habima Square. It's just one of many different installations that we can see all throughout Tel Aviv, calling by the families of these hostages to bring them home now. They're trying to put pressure on the Israeli government, but they say they're also trying to call out for those around the world to pay attention and to not forget about them, as they again are sitting for over 30 days inside the Gaza Strip. Most of the loved ones of these hostages still have very little signs of life. If they're alive, any messages of hope coming from within, most are just left to wait and hope that everything will be okay, and that hopefully soon they will hear some kind of message from them or any kind of sign. But for now, they're taking comfort in the comfort of others, the solidarity that they're all coming out to show one another, to stand hand in hand together as Israelis, calling for their release, calling to bring the hostages home now. Mary McAuliffe, Tel Aviv.
Heartbreaking. Guy Israel, a quick update. We've got a few seconds.
Yes, we're getting news out of Gaza. The IDF activity there is ongoing. We know of flares up in the air next to the Shifa hospital. We can see that image right there on the screen. And this is nighttime already, after nightfall, and the skies of Gaza are being lit up with those IDF flares as that IDF ground operation continues. We will have more information about what's going on there very soon.
Guy Israel, thank you. A very quick break. When we get back, our rolling coverage continues. Stay tuned. This is Breaking News Edition.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Over 1,300 people murdered and more than 3,000 injured, and the war with Hamas continues. We bring you first-hand testimonies from the front lines, from those who survived, and all the records of the atrocities by Hamas. Follow us as Israel fights terror from the south and north. Get the inside scoop on what's going on. Only on I24 News.
Our breaking news coverage continues. I'm Benita Levine, coming to you live from Tel Aviv. It's day 31 of the war, and the IDF is continuing with its operation to eliminate the Hamas terror group inside Gaza, following that Hamas killing rampage in southern Israel on the 7th of October, in which more than 1,400 people were killed, many at a music festival, many inside their homes. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza claims that the Palestinian death toll from the IDF retaliatory response is at more than 10,000. These figures cannot be independently verified and do not distinguish between civilians and terrorists. The number is also including those killed by Palestinian rockets that misfired and landed inside Gaza. Now, earlier on Monday, the IDF reiterating its call for Gazan civilians to head south of Wadi Gaza as the military opened a humanitarian corridor for civilians. Let's take a listen.
أنا موجود في شارع صلاح الدين جنوب حي الزيتون. إحنا اليوم فتحنا شارع صلاح الدين كممر إنساني لمواطنين شمال القطاع. أنا بطلب كمان مرة لكل مواطنين شمال القطاع ومدينة غزة، انزلوا جنوب وادي غزة. شمال القطاع ومدينة غزة هي منطقة خرب، منطقة خطيرة جدا. حماس المجرم الإرهابي بيستغلكم كدروع بشرية. انزلوا جنوب قطاع، انزلوا جنوب وادي غزة. احنا بنعطي السماح لإدخال المساعدات الإنسانية لجنوب وادي غزة.
So let's find out the latest on the ground. We go to our correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us from southern Israel. So we know sirens were sounding earlier in several communities in the south close to the border. Also, the IDF saying it's captured a Hamas stronghold in Gaza, striking 450 terror sites in the past day. What update can you share right now where you are?
So I'm speaking to you from the same location that I filmed at a couple of occasions, and one of the things that strikes me is although the Israeli attacks are continuing, we're hearing artillery, we're hearing drones and airstrikes. What's noticeable is that they're more distant from us than they have been in the past. That's because the Israeli military is advancing into the Gaza Strip. The sound of drones is a little bit more distant, and although we're able to see artillery bombardments, there was just a few minutes ago there was what appeared to be a barrage of airburst artillery munitions going into the distance, the buildings behind us. They were much more distant as the Israeli military continues to advance into the Gaza Strip. Now, it is attempting to cut off Gaza City from the remainder of the Gaza Strip in order to essentially isolate the Hamas fighters that are in there, to prevent them from escaping and to prevent others from reinforcing them. And as part of that, the Israeli military have published some information today, videos and photographs of rockets that they captured. You mentioned that there were several rocket attacks. In Gaza, the organizations in Gaza have continued making rocket attacks, but the Israeli military is doing what it can to prevent that, and they showed off some of these rocket sites that they captured today, rocket weapon systems that were pointing northwards towards Ashdod and Ashkelon, it's been noted. And now if you'll see behind me, there is yet again the Israeli military are launching flares up into the air. We've seen this a couple of times, and this is essentially them looking to illuminate the ground underneath, likely so that they can spot for targets as they continue to hold that ground with infantry and with armoured units there.
One certainly gets the sense that this operation is intensifying. The IDF also saying, Robert, that it had killed the commander of the Hamas Deir el-Balach battalion in an overnight airstrike in the Gaza Strip, Wael Asfeh, and other commanders as well. Talk to us about the operations you are hearing. As you say behind you, you can see those flares. We can see them behind you as well. The operations are complicated because of the tunnel infrastructure underground, as well as the fact that Israel has to be aware and cognizant of the fact that there are hostages being held somewhere across Gaza, more than 250 known hostages at this hour.
Absolutely. So Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant made comments regarding the fact that the Hamas commander on the ground in Gaza, Sinwar, he, in Gallant's words, is hiding in his bunker whilst he sends out his commanders to take the heat from the Israeli military. And this is a reference to the fact that Israel has successfully assassinated many commanders at a sort of mid-tactical level. This is battalion commanders. And Gallant actually referenced the fact that some of the commanders that Israel has killed are replacement commanders for the men already killed earlier in the fighting. So this is Israel attempting to put pressure on Hamas, using these airstrikes by attacking the leadership at that mid-level. Now, you mentioned the tunnels. Now, Israel is doing what it can to destroy these tunnels from the air, but on the one hand, it's not clear how effective this always is, with in certain instances it being hard to identify if airstrikes are able to take out those tunnels. Obviously, you're not there on the ground to investigate. And then to complicate factors even more, obviously, there is the question of the hostages. It's understood that the hostages are being held in these tunnels. That's what has been reported from hostages who've been previously released. And the Israeli military, it can't can't very well kill these commanders without running the risk of doing exactly the same thing to hostages that are held there. But it doesn't have any easy options when it comes to the tunnels, because if it were instead to send troops into these tunnels, this is not a good way to fight. Tunnel warfare is kind of the worst form of urban warfare, and urban warfare is one of the worst forms of fighting that troops can be involved in, one of the most dangerous theaters you can operate in. So there's little good options with regards to that.
Dramatic images behind you as you're talking. Stay safe. Correspondent Robert Swift updating us from southern Israel. Thank you very much, Rob. And now we welcome Dr. Ronnie Berger, senior clinical psychologist and family and child therapist from the Compassionate and Mindful Education Center of Tel Aviv University, and he joins us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us. It's 4 weeks in, and many are still processing the brutality and the scale of this terror rampage, the immense loss. Many families waiting for word on the hostages being held in Gaza, as my colleague was just detailing, and new information every single day. Share with us, if you will, your sense of how this nation can begin to deal or try to make sense of this constantly evolving situation.
Benita. Well, it's a difficult situation, obviously. There are all the people who experience all the atrocities down in the south, and then there is the kidnap, and then there are soldiers who are going now to fight. Nevertheless, I think that the country mobilizes its energy. There are two factors that really influence that. The first one is the fact that we really feel it's a just word, it's a survival word. You hear constantly the words from the South, the citizens who had experienced all these terrible, horrific sights, they talk about the fact that it's us or them, meaning they cannot leave it untouched. We have to do something about that situation because they've been attacked all along. And the second thing that really helps us, that we've been under those threats for many, many years. We fought several, wars. We have been surrounded by enemies. And the feeling of the public is that there's no recourse. We have to deal with that. And when we have a purpose and when we feel that it's a just war, then people really, really use all their energy and all their resilience in order to deal with the situation, support each other, and basically allow themselves to grieve and to be anxious, yet at the same time able to, fight and mobilize their support towards each other, as you can see there in the pictures.
The resilience in this country is almost tangible. There is absolutely no doubt about it. That said, there is still daily rocket fire we're reporting on every day through this war towards residential areas. Most of these rockets are intercepted, but nonetheless, it's disruptive and can be very stressful, especially for young people and the elderly racing to shelters. Talk us through your advice, how people need to remain calm and how they can help one another too.
We talk to them about relative safety. It's not a safe situation. Obviously, if you're caught there somewhere and there is shrapnels of the rockets, you'll be hurt. Nevertheless, most of the people find ways by which to protect themselves. We have protected shelters. People know the lengths of the time that they have to run. We stay close to safe places. So that's one thing. In terms of young kids, parents are instructed by us, psychologists and other mental health professionals, to protect themselves by sending them messages that, yes, it is difficult. Yes, there is some scary, but the army is really protecting us, and we are intercepting most of the thing with the Iron Dome that we are using. So in that sense, I think people can deal with the situation. There's another factor, which is called habituation. People get used to difficult situation, and they need to live in that. We called it emergency routine. We are used to that emergency. We had several situations like death and rounds like that, and adults know how to deal with that. And then he struck the kids, and they really deal with that well. The elderly, I think, that have been really used to all kind of situations. Some of them are Holocaust survivor. For them, in some ways, it's a known factor. They've dealt with horrible thing in the past, and they're used to that. So I think that doesn't deter us. And we really, even if you are going to shelters, you'll see people laughing and talking to each other and supporting. Yes, they're scared, but they also support each other. And that's really, really very important, the mutual support that people provide each other.
And Dr. Berger, part of the psychological strategy we've been talking here in studio by the terror group is this disseminating of these graphic videos of this massacre. Seeing these recurrent images obviously can spark nightmares for people of all ages, frankly. What are the long-term impacts of this kind of trauma, seeing repeated images like this?
You have to remember, Benita, some people didn't see it just in social media. They seen it straight face, you know, like the party that was in the South. And we work with those people. So the answer to that is essentially those are really difficult scenes to look at. And occasionally people have nightmares and flashback, even if they weren't in the place that all of this happened. So there are two ways that we deal with that. The first thing is, in some ways, you know, when the mind really addresses that and you have nightmares and stuff like that, it's a way of processing, you know, this terrible experience, and we talk to them and normalize them. The second thing that we do is we just allow them to do a different thing. For example, those who have seen those scenes and have difficulty sleeping, we teach them what we call safe place. It's sort of a guided imagery whereby they provide the cortex, the mind, some other, you know, visions. Part of it is things that they have done in the past that are safe, or other situations that are more mundane. And this situation can help them deter that. The final thing is people who develop symptoms that are severe, flashbacks, nightmares, etc. Psychologists know pretty well how to process those images and sort of provide them to long-term memory, and thereby allowing people to decrease the frequency and duration of those events. So we know how to deal with it. But you're right, it's difficult, and we try to deter young people to look at social media and to see all these horrible scenes that are absolutely abandonment. You know, it's really terrible.
Absolutely evil, not human at all. Doctor, we're all hearing it's a long road ahead. As we've been discussing, there's much resilience, there's much unity. We are seeing many volunteer initiatives, support programs as well. How important is it for people to band together? It can make a major difference to the psyche of the country, make people feel like they are in control.
This is absolutely important. If there is one factor that really prevent post-traumatic symptoms is social support. Social support has two factors. First of all, everybody share the same fear and the same concern. Second, they really help each other. And when people really get closer together, hug each other, be kind to each other, and we see a lot of this phenomena in the society, from flags that are being held in the street to people who come to other people, get elderly and help them, help even people that have dogs that cannot get their dogs out, send you know, packages that you can see in the photographs for the soldier. All of this is really important, both for the unity of the people as well as individually. You don't want to be passive and you don't want to be helpless. You want to do things with others that help the group itself. So that togetherness is an extremely important protective factors and resilience of our society. And we have that all along, you know, this war and even before that.
Dr. Ronnie Berger, an absolute pleasure hearing your insights. We so appreciate you speaking to us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a good and quiet, I would say, evening.
Thank you. Dr. Fadi Ismail, your thoughts?
I loved everything that the good psychologist said there. I'm a strong believer in the mind over matter. We have, actually, it's part of my research that's how I started researching the whole application of mind sciences into operational planning. We saw many times that two different units that are equally trained and equally equipped with very similar tasks, one of them performs very well, the other one performs in a very mediocre way. And it is true in so many fields. And when you study, it's all about the team spirit, it's all about mental posture, to say it in a little bit more technical terms. And I really love everything that the doctor said there. I would really emphasize a point that he talked about, is the connectedness of every individual to everything happening around them. This feeling of being isolated or lonely or all by yourself, like in the desert of your own thoughts, that is not good. What he suggested is whether it is true volunteering. There's so many ways to volunteer. Just go out, talk to people, even just be nice to people, let them be nice back to you. Understand that you are not in this alone. That creates a kind of cohesiveness and interconnectedness that really, honestly, lower the possibility of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now it's the doctor and me talking. And PTSD is no fun. Believe me, it is not. And these kinds of advice should be taken very, very seriously. About children, I have my own child. She sometimes comes and asks me. She wants to be, because she sees things, yeah, let them ventilate, but also keep them busy. Let the brains work all the time on something else. And always keep them connected. Touch each other, talk to each other, call each other. And you know what? Follow the news a little bit less. And maybe I'm kind of...
You're probably in the wrong studio to be saying that right now, but the point is taken.
It's a tough room, I get it.
No doubt that young people watching repeated images and seeing the kind of barbaric attacks that were happening, it's not normal that they happened. It's certainly not normal to be watching them.
I recall 9/11 very, very vividly. I was in California that morning, and one of the things was that children, for example, kept on seeing the reruns. And they kept on thinking that there are more and more buildings being destroyed by that airplanes keep on flying into buildings. And then somebody figured out by the end of the day or after a day or two that this is what they think is happening, until somebody simply said, hey, just take them away from the room, either shut off the set or take them out of the room, because pay attention to those vulnerable minds that don't really have a context of what's happening. And we have learned since then, we evolved. The science of psychology of disaster has evolved, and whatever the doctor said now, all this whole thing they said now, this litany of thoughts, is in a way a summary of many of those insights that we have collected the last few decades.
Yes, the difference here, very sadly, is that unfortunately there have been many images, because there have been thousands of such atrocities, thousands of murders, slaughtering of Israelis, kidnapping, butchering, etc., beheading, inflaming entire families. So therefore, the Israeli public and the entire world was exposed to so many horror stories, because there were just so many of them, and so many of them that are documented, as we can see now from that party.
And important to reiterate, as we have already, that this filming was done by the terrorists, and yet
bragging about their work and calling their families, enjoy. Mom, I just killed 10 Jews with my own hands.
And yet there are still people questioning the details and the facts on the ground. And again, it is the terror group itself who was doing the recording. I want to bring us up to speed on the latest developments on the ground. Guy, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, at the same time, what update can you share?
Yes, in the West Bank today, a pretty rare daytime operation, the IDF assisting the Shin Bet and special police forces, taking down 4 senior terror operatives in the refugee camp of Tulkarem in the West Bank. That included both the head of the military wing of Hamas and of the Fatah's Al-Aqsa brigades in Tulkarem. You can see those images right there, and if we could hear as well, there has been some extensive fire there by the IDF troops on that car with those operatives. Take a listen to this. A very rare daytime operation. We can hear that certainly, and it was filmed from various angles. A strong message from Israel to those terror groups who are trying to kill Jews both in the West Bank and in other arenas. According to the Shin Bet, this group was responsible for dozens of attacks, the planting of explosives, and sending other terrorists into Israeli territory. A daily work for the Israeli security forces as they try to keep that arena of the West Bank quiet as much as we can. And as you already mentioned, very sadly, we lost one female border police officer this morning in Jerusalem in a stabbing attack.
Different fronts at the same time, and it's something, Fadi, that Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to more broadly. He spoke a little bit earlier in the day about the axis of terror. He said it's led by Iran, something we've been discussing. It includes Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and his words, their other minions. Your assessment of the current threats right now, Guy is describing the West Bank and Gaza right now, but more broadly speaking, when you look further afield, including the Houthis, there are many fronts to be watching at the same time.
Yeah, if we're going bird's eye view, which is actually the place to begin, in my opinion, the war is not really Israel-Hamas. It is on the right now. This is a tactical point of focus, but in large, you have two major axes. One of them is the American Western axis that includes Sunni Arab states and Israel in this region, and then you have the Iranian Shiite crescent and the Russia, possibly China axis. What separates them is an issue of hegemony over resources and passages, critical passageways through the seas and land corridors and so on. There's a very strong economic a dimension to this. We have to see it on a very high level. So when Hamas did what it did on October 7th, it shook actually an international order that was shaping with the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was critical to reestablish this Western axis that will start from India throughout the Middle East to Europe, that is critical to the European economy, to Western economy, and to Asian economy in the southern part. Once Hamas did what it did, in the service and under the orders of Iran, don't let anybody confuse the issue. This is an Iranian operation. No matter how much they pretend it isn't, they actually have caused this American effort a major blow, and that needs to come back. I mean, we have to be able to stabilize the situation and get back to that effort, because as the Prime Minister said, it is a global fight, and that's what he means. This is not just a fight. Yeah, there is the abstract ideas kind of aspect of it, but there's a very real set of interests that are economic and security in nature and involve many countries. And basically, it's a war between axes in the world. It's like almost. Well, we used to talk about the East versus West. That's almost like South versus North now, if you look at the map. And this is why when we talk about Iran, we have all these forces. I don't know why we didn't mention Iraq. They have so many forces in Iraq. They have this corridor from the famous Shiite crescent from Tehran all the way to Ladiqiyah. They have so many stops in the way that where they have at least between 100 and 200,000 troops spread. They're not bad troops. They're very well trained. Some of them are former Iraqi forces, some of them former Syrian forces. Many of them participated in the civil wars in the Middle East. They're very well trained and very experienced, and they have them throughout the corridor. So it is a big issue, and it has an international global context to it. And we have to understand, really, honestly, if you were going to talk about the analytical approach to this issue.
Over and above the global context, there is the local context, and you, Guy, have details on one family who has found a way to demand answers about what is happening in terms of the Hamas developments. A Bedouin family. Bring us up to speed.
Yes, one of the, or some of the many victims of these terror attacks that we've seen on that Saturday were many Bedouin families, members of the Bedouin community in southern Israel. And a family of one of those victims, his name is Osama Abu Isa, has posted a video on social media, and they're offering a prize of $1 million to information regarding the terrorists who have slaughtered their family member. They stripped him of his clothes, they tortured him, and then they slaughtered him, and that was caught in the dashboard cameras of his car. Not that particular dashboard that we're seeing now. We'll spare you those images as they're quite graphic. And the brother of this victim, Osama Abu Isa, is saying, We want to know who is responsible. Our mentality is blood vengeance. We will reach the terrorists no matter where they are. Just one case of 1,400 Israelis. For the terrorists of Hamas, it did not matter, although they came to Israel because they searched for Jews, but anyone on their way was fair game, a fair target. Any Israeli, in this case, a Bedouin man, many foreign workers as well, Thai people who were both slaughtered and kidnapped by Hamas on that deadly Saturday.
It did not matter. They came, they were evil, that killing rampage, more than 1,400 people, thousands wounded. Senior editor, Guy Azrael, Fadi Ismail, thank you very much. Stay with us. We've got more to discuss right now. A very quick break. When we get back, our rolling coverage continues on Breaking News Edition.
A month has passed since October 7th, the day Israel was brutally attacked by Hamas. A month since the Black Sabbath, when Hamas terrorists murdered over 1,400 Israelis, wounded thousands of others, and took 240 people captive. A month since the IDF entered a war against the vicious terrorist organization. A month later, I24 News returns to the place where it all began. Join us on November 7th.